She was humming. Actually humming. Like a woman packing for a weekend spa retreat. Not walking out on 23 years of marriage in a townhouse we bought back when VHS tapes were still a thing. I stood quietly in the hallway, shoes still wet from the rain outside, watching her zip up her faux leather overnight bag like she was late for some brunch with destiny. The scent of her favorite cinnamon chai lingered in the air, probably her last act of domestic kindness, a pathetic little cover for what was really happening. "I'm leaving tonight," she said, finally acknowledging me without even turning around. "I found someone who actually listens." She tossed that line over her shoulder like it was some profound mic drop, like I was supposed to shatter into pieces on the floor. And maybe 5 years ago, I would have. Hell, maybe even 2. But tonight, I didn't even blink. I just took off my coat, hung it neatly on the hook like always, walked past her suitcase, same floral print she used the night she cheated on me in Atlantic City. Not that she ever thought I'd figure that one out, and made my way to the small drawer by the front door. The junk drawer, as she used to call it. Pins, batteries, expired coupons, and one document I'd slid in there exactly 11 days ago. She didn't notice. She was too busy texting someone. I caught a glimpse of the name, CJ Redheart. Cute. I wondered if CJ had a clue what kind of financial sinkhole she was dragging with her into whatever delusional new beginning they'd cooked up. I turned around slowly, folded paper in hand. She barely looked up. "Then you'll need this." That got her attention. Her fingers hesitated on her phone screen. She looked at the folded paper like it was a live grenade. I didn't move, just held it out like I was offering her a receipt. "What's that?" she asked, her tone suddenly less smug, more careful. "Something to make your new start easier," I said calmly, and waited until she took it. She unfolded it slowly, like she expected it to bite. Her lips moved silently as she read, brow furrowing with each line. A single page. Neat. Legal. Final. A notarized release of any future spousal claim to assets signed by her father. 3 weeks ago. Filed. Witnessed. Sealed. She blinked. Looked up. Blinked again. My dad signed this." I gave the slightest nod. "You involved your family," I said, voice low. "I just spoke to mine." For the first time that night, her smug little smirk disappeared. It wasn't fear, not yet. But it was something. A ripple. Like a spider crawling under her skin. She held the paper closer, as if maybe the signature would morph if she stared long enough. But no, that was Robert H. Langley's signature, no question. The same flourish he used on her college tuition checks and the deed to the cabin in Erie. And now, on the document that severed her from every penny she thought was waiting for her. She looked back at me. Her mouth opened, but the words didn't come. For a woman who never knew when to shut up, she suddenly forgot how to talk. I stepped aside and gently opened the door for her. She didn't move. "Is this legal?" she finally managed to stammer. I leaned closer, just enough for her to smell the rain on my jacket and the peppermint on my breath. "More legal than that consulting payment you gave your boyfriend from my mother's account." Her jaw dropped. "You're paranoid," she snapped, tone sharpening out of sheer desperation. "This is all your work stress talking. You've been off for months. You're not well." God, the gaslighting. Right on cue. "Interesting," I said with a raised eyebrow. "How many more consulting sessions were held at that Marriott by the airport?" She froze. I didn't wait for her to answer. I stepped back, gestured again to the open door. She stood there like a woman who just realized she'd jumped out of a plane and forgotten the parachute. Eyes darting, fingers tightening around the paper. "Good night, Carol." And I walked into the kitchen like it was just another Tuesday. She followed me with her eyes like she was trying to figure out whether I'd gone insane or just grown a spine overnight. The paper trembled slightly in her hands now, like it had a pulse of its own, and for once, Carol wasn't rushing to fill the silence. Her mouth opened, then closed, like maybe she wanted to ask why her father would sign something like this, but didn't want to look as clueless as she suddenly felt. "Mark," she said, trying to steady her voice, This isn't real. My father wouldn't. He'd never." 3 weeks ago," I said, leaning against the kitchen doorway like we were just chatting about the weather. "He met me at that diner you used to hate. The one with the orange booths." "You're lying," she hissed, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. "He wouldn't do that behind my back." I gave a soft, Humorless chuckle. Funny thing about your dad, he hates liars. Always did. Remember when you told him we were downsizing because of my salary, when really you were burning $5,000 a month on that retreat program in Sedona? He asked me about that. Her face tightened. I watched as the color drained from her cheeks, not all at once, just a slow, deliberate fade, like a filter sliding off. Her fingers curled tighter around the document, as if trying to crush it would make it go away. He thought it was a temporary thing, she said, as darting like a cornered raccoon. He knew I was under stress. He supported me. He supported you, I repeated quietly, until he realized what you were doing to his grandson's college fund. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. She blinked hard. Twice. Then finally looked down at the signature at the bottom of the document. Robert Langley. His signature hadn't changed in decades. It was the same one etched into the leather cover of his business cards, the same one he used to sign my union recommendation back in '04. And now it was under a paragraph that stripped his daughter of any claim to his assets, or mine, should our marriage dissolve. What is this even for? She snapped, panic creeping into her tone now. Why would he sign it? Why would you ask him to? I stepped forward, calm and slow, until I was just a few feet from her. She smelled like lavender conditioner and sweat. You involved your family, I said softly. I just spoke to mine. The words weren't loud, but they cracked through the air like a whip. Her entire posture changed, shoulders slumped an inch, jaw locked, breath caught in her throat. She looked down at the paper again, like maybe she'd missed a line. Like maybe there was some clause, some loophole, some magic footnote that would undo what had already been set in motion. But there wasn't, because this wasn't some bluff. It wasn't a wake-up call or a desperate cry for her to come to her senses. It was a move, a clean, precise move in a game she didn't even know had started. And she was already 5 steps behind. She turned on her heel and stormed toward her phone, heels clacking on the hardwood. I watched as she hit her father's number, favorites list, top row, and pressed the phone to her ear. Voicemail. Her lips twitched. She called again. Voicemail. I saw it in real time, that flicker of uncertainty turning to something darker. Doubt. Not just in me, but in the version of events she'd been feeding herself for months. I stood still, arms folded, while she tried her sister next. Voicemail. Tried her cousin. Busy signal. She was chewing her lip now. Okay, she said aloud, almost to herself. They're just busy, that's all. She turned toward me, some flicker of bravado sparking again. You think you can turn my family against me? You think they'll choose you? I smiled. I don't think anything. And then, as if some ghost passed through her spine, she finally got it. This wasn't a man bluffing. This wasn't the quiet husband who used to let her win fights just to keep the peace. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a fuse, already lit, already burning. The panic didn't hit her all at once. It came in little waves. In the way her voice cracked when she called again. In the way she suddenly sat down, forgetting she was supposed to be walking out that door. In the way her hand kept touching the paper like she needed to confirm it still existed. She didn't cry. Carol didn't cry easily. But when she looked up at me again, I saw it, a tiny shimmer, stuck behind her lashes, like the first crack in a frozen lake right before the ice gives way. She didn't understand everything yet, but she knew one thing. She wasn't in control anymore. The first call was fast, automatic. Her thumb hit Dad in the favorites list like it had muscle memory, like the sound of his gravel voice could rewrite what she'd just read. Her eyes were wide, but her mouth was clamped tight, and the phone pressed so hard to her ear it looked like she was trying to absorb reassurance through the plastic. Voicemail. She pulled it back and stared at the screen like it was malfunctioning. No, that's not. He always picks up, she mumbled, mostly to herself. Second try. Voicemail again. Her fingers fluttered for a second before tapping Samantha, her sister, the loyal echo chamber, the one who helped her pick out the overpriced furniture in the guest room and once toasted Carol's independence over too many margaritas. Voicemail. The pit in her stomach was no longer just a flicker. It was spreading now, like a cold flood rising up her spine. Still, she kept her expression tight controlled. Like maybe if she just moved fast enough, she could outrun whatever this was. I leaned against the hallway arch, silent, letting her dig through her contacts like a woman searching for the last oxygen tank on a sinking ship. She called him next. CJ Redhart. It rang once, then stopped. No voicemail. Just a dead end. Her eyes snapped to me. What did you do? Her voice cracked at the end of the sentence, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like fear dressed up in bravado, like a house cat hissing at a storm. I didn't answer. I didn't move. She started toward me, holding her phone up like it was a badge, a weapon, a shield, anything that might stop what she was beginning to feel. I asked you a question, she barked, but the volume only made her sound more desperate. Did you block them? Is this some kind of twisted game? Her hand trembled slightly. Not enough for someone else to notice. But I'd seen her pour vodka into her smoothie when she thought I wasn't watching. I knew her tells. She was unraveling and trying to rewind the tape at the same time. Still no answer from me. I just stepped forward, slow and quiet, and placed my palm on the edge of the front door. She blinked. What are you doing? I opened it, held it, motioned slightly, just a nod after you. She stood still for a moment, realizing she wasn't being chased, or begged for, or even argued with. I wasn't asking her to stay. I wasn't offering closure. I was offering nothing, just a quiet exit. No, she said, half laughing. No, you don't get to just end it like this. You don't get to freeze me out and act like you're the victim. You were. I shut the door. Soft. No slam. No drama. Just the quiet click of finality. She didn't knock. Not right away. I heard nothing. Just the ticking of the old clock in the hallway and the low hum of the fridge. The same sounds that had filled our house for decades, the background noise of a life built on routines, on assumptions, on quiet little betrayals. On the other side of the door, I imagined her standing there, still holding her phone, still hoping one of those people, any of them, would return the call, would confirm that she was still in control. But none of them did. And I didn't either. Because for the first time in years, Carol Langley was alone. And not just in a hallway. Not just in the rain-soaked street outside our house. She was alone in the story. The one she thought she was writing. The one where she was the misunderstood heroine, the reborn woman reclaiming her life, the brave soul who dared to walk away. But now? Now the chapters weren't hers anymore. They were mine. The rain had picked up by the time she pulled away, wipers flailing like frantic arms. She didn't even check the rearview mirror. Probably couldn't. Her hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles pale, jaw clenched so hard I imagined her molars would be sore by morning. Carol never liked being out of control. She used to complain about turbulence on planes, even if it lasted 10 seconds. But this was a different kind of drop. The kind where the free fall keeps going, and no one tells you how far the ground is. She made it about 4 blocks before she pulled over under an old sycamore, yanked her phone out again, and tapped in another number, her father's lawyer. A straight arrow, old school, ex-Marine. The same man who helped Robert Langley move assets before his stroke, who handled the sale of their vacation home in Maryland, who once helped Carol out of a tax mess when she claimed a bogus business loss from that essential oils company she ran for 6 months. Voicemail. Again. She cursed under her breath. Called again. Then again. Nothing. She sat there, in the driver's seat of her shiny leased SUV, staring at her own reflection in the rain-flecked windshield like it might tell her what the hell was happening. The call log looked like a panic attack. 7 missed connections in 15 minutes. Still, she told herself it was just bad luck. A fluke. A weird coincidence. So she pivoted, opened her banking app, probably expecting a little boost. Something to remind her she still had power. A joint savings account I had let her manage for years, and the small stash she believed I didn't know about. The one she'd quietly built by moving round-up deposits from our credit card points. Login. Successful. Balance. $0. Then, this account has been temporarily restricted. Contact your banking representative. The smile faded instantly. Her thumb scrambled to check the other account. Same message. She opened our investment portfolio next. Not hers, ours. We'd split the management. She handled the real estate shares. I took care of the blue chips. Blocked. Not a glitch. Intentional. Locked tighter than a vault. Her lips parted in confusion, and for a second, she just sat there completely still, completely quiet, the rain playing percussion on the windshield like some cruel countdown. And that's when she remembered the line. The one buried in the middle of that signed release. The part she hadn't read all the way through in the heat of the moment. She fumbled through her purse, tore the folded paper back out, smoothing it against the steering wheel. There it was. As of April 3rd, my estate shall benefit only those who stood by my son. It wasn't phrased like a threat. It was too calm for that. It was a surgical cut, a line drawn in ink and stone. And Carol? Carol had chosen a side. Not with her mouth. With her actions. With her absence. With every withdrawal, every lie cloaked in therapeutic buzzwords, every retreat that was really a weekend with a man who couldn't spell commitment but knew how to compliment her yoga form. She stared at the sentence so long she stopped blinking. My estate shall benefit only those who stood by my son. And now, the air inside that car felt tighter. Like the oxygen had been replaced with something denser. Something that weighed on her chest. She called CJ again. Straight to voicemail. This time she didn't try a third time. Because a different kind of voice was getting louder in her head. Not mine. Her father's. The last thing he told her at Thanksgiving. You always say you're doing what's best for yourself. I hope that self's still around when you're done burning the bridges. At the time, she laughed it off. Smirked. Rolled her eyes. Now, parked alone with nothing but flashing raindrops and a frozen bank account to keep her company, the echo of that voice sounded a lot less like a joke and a lot more like a eulogy. By the time she reached the cabin, the sky was already that miserable steel gray that makes even summer feel like November. The gravel cracked under her tires as she pulled up the familiar drive, trying to convince herself this was still hers. That even if the accounts were locked and the lawyer had vanished, this place, this one quiet lake house, would be her sanctuary. She'd always romanticized it. Called it her reset button when she needed space from Mark's moods or all the stress at home, which, translated, meant weekends with wine, her Spotify playlist called Clarity and Cabernet, and, occasionally, the soft arrival of CJ's pickup truck after dark. She parked, popped the trunk, and grabbed the duffel. No hesitation now. Just automatic movement. As if walking faster would keep the truth from catching up. But the key didn't fit. She jiggled it. Flipped it. Tried the spare under the fake rock near the steps. No click. No welcome. Just a tiny laminated note taped to the inside of the front door's glass pane. Private property. Access restricted. Contact RL Holdings. Her lips moved as she read it. Twice. 3 times. RL Holdings. Robert Langley. Her father. No, that couldn't be. She knew this cabin. Knew every screw in the deck. Every creak in the upstairs floorboard. She was on the deed. She was or rather, she had been. That's when she remembered the conversation. 9 months ago. Her father mentioned consolidating some property under a trust to avoid tax complications. She barely listened. She nodded, sipped her tea, and kept scrolling Zillow listings with CJ, looking for something new, just ours. Apparently, the consolidation had happened. And she'd signed the paperwork like a dutiful daughter, too busy daydreaming about lakefront real estate in New York to read the fine print on what she was giving up in Pennsylvania. She backed away from the door slowly, like it might explode if she moved wrong. In the car again, breathing through her mouth now, her eyes glassy, but still dry. Next stop, the inheritance. Her mother's jewelry. Some bonds. A small brokerage account left after Aunt Jeanette passed. Enough to float her until she figured out her next move. She pulled into the bank half an hour later. It was the kind of branch with fake wood floors and that same god-awful muzak playing year-round. The teller smiled, briefly, then clicked through the screen as Carol handed over her ID. Then the smile faded. I'm sorry, Mrs. Langley. Ms. Langley, we actually have a restriction on this account pending custodial review. Carol blinked. What does that mean? It's marked as contested. There's a flag from a co-executor, and until it's resolved, disbursements are paused. Co-executor? She repeated, like it was a foreign word. There isn't a co-executor. The teller's face went taut. There is now. And then she saw it. The manila folder on the desk. Her name, typed next to another. Mark A. Langley, co-executor. She didn't even wait for a copy. She just walked out, almost forgetting her purse. That was the moment it started to sink in. Not a dramatic movie moment, no screaming in the rain or dropping to her knees. Just a slow, precise unraveling. Like a sweater thread tugged gently until the whole sleeve comes off. She sat in the car, hands gripping the wheel so hard her fingers went white, and pulled up her Venmo. Not because she needed to, but because panic makes you check everything, even things you know shouldn't matter. There, in the activity history, was the last red flag. 2 months ago, a $1,700 transfer labeled Mom's Pharmacy Delivery, Urgent, from an account listed under her name. But that wasn't her mother. It was his, Mark's mother. The one Carol pretended to take care of on paper. The one she visited once a week, just long enough to justify the home care stipend her father sent over out of guilt. She thought Mark never saw the statements. He had. And worse, her father had too. Because the day Carol lied about the memory supplements and pocketed the cash instead, that was the day Robert Langley quietly copied every transaction into a separate folder. The same folder Mark now had full access to, courtesy of a legally signed family directive titled Emergency Oversight Clause. She wasn't just losing money. She was losing credibility. And once that goes, you don't just lose the accounts. You lose the room. She didn't notice the envelope at first. It was wedged between two folded sweaters in the side pocket of her duffel, tucked so neatly it could have passed for hotel stationery. She found it only after tearing through her bag in frustration, looking for her spare credit card, the one she'd stashed months ago in case of an emergency. Well, this was the emergency. Only now, her lifeboat had a hole in it, and she brought it with her. She hesitated when she saw the handwriting. His handwriting. No name. No flourish. Just her name on the front in steady, unmistakable penmanship. Carol. She sat back on the motel bed, the one with scratchy linens and a lamp that flickered if you breathed wrong, and opened it with shaking fingers. Inside wasn't much. No long letter. No tirade. Just a post-it note. This isn't revenge. This is clarity. Below it, paper-clipped, was a 3-page printout. Typed. Highlighted. Expense summary. Langley Trust, Elder Care Account. Reviewed and flagged. She read the first few lines. Her face twitched. July 4th. Therapeutic massage for Mrs. Langley for $150. Carol was in Aspen with CJ. August 9th. Emergency courier, $320. No courier services used that day. September 15th. Dietary supplements for cognitive function, $610. Receipt shows purchase of premium skincare at boutique chain. By the third bullet, her hand was at her mouth. By the fifth, her eyes were glassed over. Every lie, every excuse she thought had blended into the chaos of caregiving, every white lie she justified because she deserved something back, was right there. Dissected. Annotated. Documented. He hadn't confronted her. Not when it happened. Not even once. He just watched. Waited. Collected. Line after line, it was like reading her own confession, but stripped of the fantasy. No filters. No justifications. There were even timestamps. Some had notes like, Carol claimed this was a gift to the nurse. Nurse was off that week. One had this chilling annotation. Used trust funds to pay for a weekend at the lake house with another adult guest. Confirmed by check-in records. She clutched the papers so hard the corners creased. Her breathing went shallow. No, she whispered, shaking her head, as if that would make the ink disappear. This is twisted. He's twisting everything. She stood up, pacing the room now like a caged animal. It wasn't like that. I was taking care of her. He knows I hated that hospital smell. It was suffocating. I deserved a break now and then. But the air in the room didn't care. The mirror didn't argue. And the papers didn't lie. She sat back down and read it again. And this time, the shame hit differently. It wasn't just about being caught. It wasn't just about the money. It was the fact that he'd known all along and never said a word. He let her keep talking, keep spinning, keep justifying. And she never once thought to stop. She convinced herself she was the brave one, the one making hard choices, the one carrying emotional weight. But now, she was just a grifter in yoga pants, a petty embezzler with a victim complex. And Mark hadn't needed to raise his voice or press charges to make her feel it. Just 3 words. This isn't revenge. And then the worst part. This is clarity. And for the first time since leaving that townhouse, Carol didn't feel righteous. She just felt seen. And she didn't like what was looking back. The next morning, she put on her best attempt at control, black leggings, oversized designer sunglasses, and that fake smile she used to rehearse in the mirror when she wanted to look unbothered. She drove straight to the gym like nothing had happened, like the world hadn't cracked underneath her Manolos. The gym was supposed to be neutral ground, familiar turf, her fortress of filtered air, eucalyptus towels, and post-cardio validation. The place where everyone smiled and waved and said she looked amazing for her age. She walked up to the glass doors, swiped her fob. Red light. She blinked. Tried again. Red light. Access denied. She looked up at the young guy at the front desk, probably didn't know her history of passive-aggressively scolding the cleaning staff for not folding towels properly. Must be a glitch, she said lightly, voice sugar-coated. Can you check it? He tapped the keyboard. Paused. It looks like your account's been flagged. You might need to speak with management. Flagged. Not expired. Not unpaid. Flagged. Her mouth went dry. I've had a premium membership here for 8 years. Yes, ma'am, but I can't really override what's in the system. She stared at him. He didn't meet her gaze. Just kept tapping, pretending to type. She knew that move. It was the same one she used on waiters when she didn't want a tip. She turned and walked out, the sound of the automatic doors swallowing the final ounce of her gym-level dignity. By noon, it got worse. Lunch with Lindsay canceled. Not rescheduled. Not postponed. Just a 2-line text. Hey, something came up at the firm. Let's rain check. No emoji. No exclamation marks. The message equivalent of cold soup. Lindsay was the one who used to joke that Carol had the patience of a hospice nurse. The same one who cried laughing when Carol told her how Mark's mother used to think I was a nurse named Sharon. But now Lindsay wasn't answering her calls. And Carol started noticing the pattern. The friend group text was silent. The Pilates group chat, dead. She posted a throwback selfie from the beach last year, tagged #healing_energy and #clarity, and not a single like in 2 hours. Something was off. Then came the final slap. CJ didn't show up that night. No text. No working late excuse. No guilt-ridden call. Just silence. She opened their last chat and scrolled. The last thing he sent was a photo of his new grill setup. Her reply, some flirty comment about breaking it in, was still marked red. No response. She called. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. When it hit her, it wasn't loud. It was quiet. Like someone slowly turning down the volume on her entire life. People were hearing things. About the trust fund. About Mark's mother. About the Caretaker Act. And she knew how this worked. She'd done it to others. Whisper campaigns. Selective concern. Phrases like, I don't want to judge, but, and, I heard from someone close to the family. No one accused her directly. They didn't have to. The looks did the talking. The silence did the rest. By that evening, even her Facebook feed had turned against her. Birthday wishes from last month had been untagged. Group photos deleted. Carol Langley was becoming a ghost in real time. And the worst part? She knew they were right. But she still wasn't ready to admit it. Not out loud. So instead, she poured herself a glass of white wine in a glass she stole from the lake cabin 4 years ago, back when she thought she'd be queen of the post-divorce kingdom. She toasted her reflection in the motel window. Still standing, she whispered. But even her own reflection seemed to look away. The first time someone spotted Mark at the Sullivan County estate auction, they almost didn't recognize him. Not because he looked different, he still had the same weathered hands, same steel blue eyes, same quiet posture like he'd been carved out of Appalachian mountain rock, but because of the way he moved. Relaxed. Unafraid. Like a man who didn't owe anyone an explanation, least of all the woman whose name used to follow as like an afterthought. He stood by the fence post, sipping black coffee from a dented thermos, watching as a beat-up 2-bedroom cabin went up for bidding. The place had a roof line that sagged like a drunk's shoulders and a chimney that leaned 6 degrees south, but Mark looked at it like it was a cathedral. 10,000, he said, clear and calm. The auctioneer blinked. We got 10? Now who'll give 12? Mark didn't flinch when no one countered. Just waited. The way men wait who've seen worse things than a rotted subfloor and some raccoon scat in the attic. Sold. By the next weekend, he and his cousin Danny, ex-Navy, retired welder, twice divorced and twice remarried to the same woman, were on site with a trailer full of lumber and a generator that growled like an angry dog. They didn't talk much. Just worked. Hammer. Sand. Strip. Patch. Word started spreading in town. He bought that dump by the river. He's rebuilding it himself. He's out there every day. Even Sundays. People drove by slow just to watch. Mark would nod politely but never stop working. The man who once sat silently at charity events next to Carol in a suit that didn't quite fit was now knee-deep in river mud, refurbishing an old Grady white boat like it was a sacred ritual. When Mrs. Fairbanks from the bakery asked, half-jokingly, "So, what happened to Carol?" Mark didn't blink, just wiped sweat from his brow and said, "She's finding herself." Simple. Final. Delivered with that small smile people couldn't quite read. Not cruel. Not smug. Just clean. Carol's name came up often in the following weeks, usually in whispers. Rumors bounced around faster than church gossip. That she'd been locked out of the gym. That her boyfriend vanished. That she was seen pacing outside a branch office of her father's law firm, arguing with someone who wouldn't let her in. Mark never commented. He didn't have to. Instead, he installed a wood stove in the new place, with stone he laid by hand. He restored 3 boats. One was donated to a local veterans group. Another he kept for himself. The third? No one knew. It just disappeared after one quiet afternoon. Some said he sold it. Others said he took it up the river and sank it on purpose. He started hosting Sunday coffee hours. Just him, Danny, a thermos, and whoever showed up with questions about how to replace a beam or restore old pine floors. He didn't talk about the past. He didn't talk about Carol. But he didn't avoid it, either. And in that silence, in that discipline, in that complete lack of bitterness, people noticed something. Mark hadn't been broken. He'd been refined. Not hidden. Not licking wounds. Evolving. While Carol scrambled to patch her social wounds and spin a new narrative, Mark didn't need one. He was the narrative. The man who didn't fight the fire. He just stepped out of the house and built a better one from the ashes. Brick by brick. Board by board. Without looking back. It was just after 6 when the knock came. Faint, hesitant, like she'd practiced it in the car and still wasn't sure if she wanted him to answer. Mark didn't react right away. He was hunched over an old mahogany rudder, smoothing out a crack with his thumb, grease under his nails, the kind of focus you only get when you stop letting the past talk louder than the present. Another knock. A little louder this time. He glanced at the clock, 6:04 p.m., and wiped his hands on a rag that used to be one of her Pilates towels. Fitting. When he opened the door to the workshop, the evening sun framed her like a shadow pretending to be light. Carol stood on the porch, clutching a cheap purse that looked borrowed, hair wind-tangled, mascara smudged just enough to make you wonder if the tears were real or strategic. "Hi," she said, her voice brittle. He didn't answer. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Can I come in?" He stared at her for a moment, then stepped back, not a welcome, not an invitation. Just space. She took it. The inside of the workshop was simple, clean, smelled like cedar and solvent. There were 2 boats mid-repair, tools hanging neatly, and a kettle whistling softly on the wood-burning stove. "You're hard to find," she said, glancing around like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands. "I've been trying to reach you." "You haven't," Mark said without looking at her. She blinked. "I called." "No, you tried to control the story." "Not the same thing." She looked down, biting the inside of her cheek. He knew that move. The "I'm the victim here" face. "I didn't know he'd cut me off," she said quietly. "I had no idea my dad would do that. I mean, he never would have done that unless. Mark raised an eyebrow. She didn't finish. Mark grabbed a small wooden box from the shelf behind his workbench. No flourish. No build-up. Just opened it, pulled out a plain white envelope, and held it out. "What's this?" she asked, not reaching for it. "One last thing," he said. "You'll want to read it somewhere quiet." Carol hesitated, but then took it, turning it over in her hands like it might burn her. It was sealed, but her name was written on the front in familiar, careful cursive. Her son's handwriting. She paled. "What is this?" she asked again, but softer now, dread already chewing at the edge of her voice. Mark leaned against the bench, arms folded. "You didn't know a lot of things," he said evenly. "You didn't know he saw the transfers. You didn't know he found the receipts from the cabin. You didn't know about the night he walked into your room and overheard you talking to CJ on speaker." She shook her head. "No. He would have told me. He waited. Just like I did." Her fingers trembled now. "What did you say to him?" "I didn't have to say much. He already knew who stayed. And who left." She sat on the edge of a stool, clutching the envelope like it was the only thing tethering her to the floor. "He's your son too," she whispered. Mark didn't move. "Exactly." The room fell into silence. No yelling, no lectures, just the creaking of old wood and the quiet hum of a man who no longer needed to win the argument, because he already had. Carol stood after a long pause, the letter still pressed to her chest. "Is this it, then?" she asked. "This your idea of revenge?" Mark looked at her one last time. Calm, direct. "This isn't revenge," he said. "This is consequence." And with that, he turned back to the rudder, as if the most broken thing in the room wasn't standing behind him, shaking quietly in designer sneakers that no longer fit the role. She left without another word, the letter unopened. But not for long. She sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before tearing open the envelope. The motel parking lot was half empty, silent except for the low buzz of a faulty streetlight flickering overhead. The same one that had buzzed the night before when she curled up in bed, rereading old text from CJ that hadn't aged well under scrutiny. She unfolded the pages inside, expecting a guilt trip. Maybe a note from Mark dripping with some smug moral high ground. Instead, she saw 3 signatures, lined up clean and final on the bottom of a single, devastating document. Relinquishment of power of attorney. Filed. Witnessed. Effective immediately. Her eyes jumped back to the top. This letter is to formally revoke any and all rights previously granted to Carol and Langley regarding legal, medical, and financial decisions on behalf of Robert H. Langley. She blinked hard. Once. Twice. There was more. I, Robert H. Langley, being of sound mind and under no duress, rescind any authority once held by my daughter, Carol A. Langley, in matters pertaining to my person, estate, or well-being. Next line, in Mark's steady handwriting. I, Mark A. Langley, as co-executor and caretaker during medical events, acknowledge and approve this transfer. And then, the signature that stopped her heart. Jared T. Langley, their son. The letter continued. Mom, I love you, but I won't be part of what you did. I saw the invoices. I saw the footage from Grandma's care home. You said she was confused, but she wasn't the one lying. I'm sorry. Don't contact me until you're ready to tell the truth. Her hands trembled so hard the paper rustled like dry leaves. Her breathing hitched, short, shallow, gasping. The kind of panic that doesn't let you cry. That just locks your throat and hollows your chest. Jared, the one she used to call her emotional compass. The one she bought concert tickets for when Mark forgot. The one she once bragged about in front of her yoga class. He always sees both sides. He's mature for his age. He saw both sides, all right. And he chose one, not hers. She slammed the visor down and stared at herself in the mirror. But the woman looking back wasn't composed, wasn't clever. She looked like someone mid-drowning. You little bastard, she whispered, her voice cracking. You ungrateful. But the words fell flat. Because even she knew this wasn't betrayal. This was judgment. And she'd earned it. She clutched the paper against her chest like it might stitch something back together. But the rip was too clean, too intentional. There was no rant, no cruelty, just clarity. Outside, gravel shifted. She looked up. Mark walked past her car window, quiet, deliberate, the collar of his work jacket turned up against the wind. His boots didn't pause. His eyes didn't flick toward the glass. He didn't even acknowledge her. He just kept walking, like she didn't exist. And in that moment, she felt it. Not anger, not even grief, but absence. Mark was done. Her father was done. Her son was gone. And for the first time in her meticulously controlled, socially curated, gaslight-polished life, Carol Langley was absolutely alone. Not abandoned. Dismissed. She said it like she was picking out a paint color. Like it was no big deal. I didn't cheat out of hate, Eric. I was just bored. I remember the exact way her wrist flicked when she swirled her wine, the clink of her glass when it touched her ring. The same ring I gave her 8 years ago after saving for 6 months and proposing in a thunderstorm because she said rain is romantic. Now, apparently, so has Ben. Her phone was on the table, lit up like a Christmas tree. I didn't need to lean over. This screen was facing me. Bright, casual, smug. Can't wait to see you tonight, Ben kiss mark. The lipstick emoji was a nice touch. Subtle. Refined. Really brought the betrayal home. I stared at it for a second longer than I probably should have. Not because I was shocked. No, that part was gone the second she opened her mouth. I stared because something in me cracked. Not loudly, not violently. Just shifted. Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't hide the screen. Hell, she didn't even glance at it. She just took another sip, like we were discussing takeout options and not the fact that she was having hotel sex with someone named Ben. Someone whose name came with a little red kiss. Bored, I repeated in my head. Like I was an old toy she outgrew. A worn-out hoodie. Something that used to feel good but now just sat in the back of a drawer, taking up space. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. I think she expected me to cry, or scream, or break something. You can see it in her eyes, that little glimmer of performance-ready panic, just in case the scene got dramatic. But I didn't give her one. I stood up. I walked to the sink, rinsed my glass, set it down softly, dried my hands, and walked out of the kitchen. She blinked. Once. "You're not going to say anything?" she called out after me, still seated at the table like this was some passive-aggressive dinner theater. I didn't answer. I went upstairs. In our bedroom, the one we still technically shared, I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a solid 10 minutes. Not because I was numb, but because I could feel everything rearranging inside me. My bones didn't ache. They shifted, like my body was rejecting something it had carried for too long. My wedding photo on the dresser. Her heels kicked off in the corner like she owned the space. Her perfume bottle, half full, smug as hell. I opened the drawer beside the bed, took out the old watch my dad gave me. I hadn't worn it in years. She said it was too clunky. I put it on. It ticked. So did something else inside me. Tick, tick, tick. That was the sound of him dying. The man who let her speak to him like that and still begged for table scraps of affection. The man who made excuses every time she came home at midnight smelling like someone else's cologne masked in cheap gin. The man who thought maybe if he worked a little harder, bought a few more flowers, fixed the damn garbage disposal on the first try, she'd remember why she married him. No, that man was gone. Rachel just didn't know it yet. The next morning, she made pancakes. Pancakes. Like we were in a 1950s diner commercial and not a slow-motion car crash. She stood at the stove humming some Fleetwood Mac song, ironic, and asked how I wanted my eggs. I said, however, without looking up from my coffee. It was too bitter. I drank it anyway. She sat across from me, elbows on the table like a teenager pretending to behave, and said, "You're taking it well." I chewed slowly. Swallowed. Sure. That was it. That was the moment she decided I wasn't a threat. No fury, no tantrum, no thrown plates or late night crying on the couch. I didn't slam the door. I didn't text a friend. Hell, I didn't even touch my whiskey stash. Just calm, clinical, ice-cold civility. She mistook it for weakness. That was her first mistake. By Thursday, she was whistling in the hallway. I swear to God. She even called me babe once, like it hadn't been 6 days since she declared her boredom and confessed to screwing her personal dopamine drip named Ben. I smiled. She noticed. "There's the old Eric," she said, winking. The old Eric. Interesting choice of words. That night, I deleted my Facebook. Not deactivated, deleted. Gone. History. Memories, photos, tags, obliterated. I didn't want reminders. I didn't want her comments under old vacation pics from Maui saying best trip ever smiling face with hard eyes. I didn't want anything that painted a version of us that only existed in photo filters. She noticed the next morning. "Did you get hacked or something?" I sipped my orange juice. Nope. She kept looking at me like I'd lost something. She wasn't wrong. What she didn't know was that I'd lost her on purpose. The silence in the house changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was organized. Like the air had been restructured around my decision. Like every creak of the floorboard and distant car alarm was syncing with a slow, perfect rhythm. She started walking differently. Hair always done. Nails fresh. Lipstick just a little too obvious for breakfast. I was supposed to notice. I didn't. Instead, I started waking up at 5:30. Not to make her breakfast. Not for any self-help bullshit. Just to sit in the quiet and feel how far away I already was. Every minute of silence was a blueprint. Every polite smile was a demolition. She thought I was being mature. That I was coping. That maybe we could still have the kind of marriage where the husband knows about the affair but just swallows it like a mild inconvenience. A cracked tile in an otherwise livable house. What she didn't understand, what she never understood, is that men like me don't scream when we burn. We rebuild, brick by brick, behind soundproof walls. And when we're done, we leave the matchbox behind. I started going to the gym at 6 a.m., not because I had something to prove, but because I needed somewhere to put the noise. There's something comforting about metal, about the way weights don't lie to you. You push or you don't. You lift or you fail. No passive-aggressive comments, no lipstick-smeared messages from Ben. No, I was just bored, echoing off a wine glass. Just resistance and gravity. By week 2, my body started shifting. Slightly at first, shoulders tightening, jaw settling into a more permanent line. My wedding ring, once loose from stress weight loss, started fitting again. I still wore it. Not out of hope. Out of irony. She started noticing. Getting fit again. Huh? She asked, leaning in the doorway one morning, towel draped, makeup already too precise for 7 a.m. I didn't look up from tying my shoes. Figured I'd stop wasting time. She laughed, but her voice cracked at the end, like a bad note on a violin. I stopped initiating conversation. Completely. If she didn't speak, the house stayed silent. No more, "How was your day?" No more, "Need anything from the store?" None of that placeholder intimacy people mistake for connection. Just air and footsteps. One night she walked into the living room in that satin robe she used to wear when she wanted attention. She stood there for maybe 30 seconds, posing like I was still subscribed to the idea of us. I muted the TV. Then I unmuted it. She stood there a little longer, then shuffled off to bed. That robe used to make me drop everything. Now I just wondered how many times it had been on the floor of someone else's hotel room. I didn't ask. I wasn't curious. Curiosity implies investment. And I was divesting. Every smile became a transaction. Every glance from her was a negotiation I didn't feel like making. I started watching her like a stranger, like a case study in arrogance. She moved through the house like a woman still playing a role in a movie that got canceled mid-season. She said things like, "We should take a weekend trip soon, and maybe you could come with me to that gallery next month." Gallery. As if culture could repaint betrayal. I'd just nod and say, maybe, like I was humoring a child who believed in unicorns. She hadn't realized yet that the locks had changed. Not on the doors. On my soul. The key she used to have, empathy, guilt, shared memories, inside jokes, the sin of our first apartment, none of that fit anymore. She could jiggle it all she wanted. That lock wasn't opening again. The old Eric would have cracked by now. He'd have broken down in the garage. He'd have begged for answers, written long, embarrassing texts at 2 a.m., and tried to fix something that was built on wet cardboard. But that guy? Dead. And his replacement didn't scream. He studied. And he was getting stronger. Natalie wasn't flashy. She didn't wear perfume that lingered or heels that announced her arrival like a drum roll. She just was. Quiet. Efficient. The kind of person who remembers if you take your coffee with 2 sugars or none at all. The type of woman no one ever warns you about, because she doesn't need to be warned about. She first noticed the change during a Tuesday staff meeting when I corrected the regional numbers without even checking my notes. She raised an eyebrow. "You've been sharper lately." I shrugged. "Been sleeping better." That was a lie. I hadn't really slept in weeks. But my mind was clean. Focused. Rage makes a mess. Silence, when used right, clears the clutter. The next day, she caught me in the break room. "You're not your usual quiet self," she said, stirring her tea. I didn't respond. Just gave her that half smile I'd been practicing lately. The one that says I'm here, but not all of me. We started having lunch together. Nothing dramatic. 2 containers, 2 chairs on the back patio of the office, near the HVAC unit that buzzed like an old fridge. It was unglamorous. It was perfect. She didn't flirt. Not even a hint. She asked questions, real ones. About books. About travel. About the kind of stuff people forget they love when they're too busy pretending they're okay. One day she said, "You ever feel like you're living next to your own life? Watching it go by?" I nodded. Every damn day. She nodded back, like we were 2 witnesses in the same trial. She never asked if I was married. She saw the ring. She also saw the distance behind my eyes. Smart woman. Intuitive. Too intuitive to ask stupid questions like, "Are you happy?" Instead, she just listened. And when she laughed at something I said, really laughed, head back, eyes closed, it hit me how long it had been since someone heard me, not just waited for their turn to speak. One afternoon, while we were finishing sandwiches, she said, "Whatever you're going through, you wear it well. Like someone rebuilding something, brick by brick." I didn't answer, just looked down at my hands, calloused from the gym, steadier than they'd been in years. She got up to toss her napkin. "Keep going," she said over her shoulder. "You're almost through." She didn't mean through with Rachel. She meant through the fog, through the shame, through the part where I still needed permission to feel like I mattered. And for the first time since the wine glass, the emoji, I was just bored, I didn't feel empty. I felt dangerous, because I was starting to remember who I was before I shrank to fit her version of love. She started dressing like a woman auditioning for a role she already lost. Tighter dresses, heels tall enough to snap an ankle, lipstick in a shade called Venom, or something equally desperate. Her perfume became louder too, like she wanted every room to remember she was there long after she left it. Rachel still went out. Dinner with friends, gallery openings, just drinks after Pilates. The lies weren't even coded in effort anymore. She didn't need to try because I wasn't asking. And my silence? It fed her ego like gasoline on a dying flame. She took my indifference as proof of her invincibility. She thought I had accepted it, that I'd been outmaneuvered, emotionally declawed. She confused my distance for defeat. One night, she walked out of the house in a backless black dress that was either a fashion statement or a dare. She leaned over to fix her heel strap, made sure I was watching. I wasn't. She stood up, smoothed her dress, gave me a look that said, "Jealous yet?" I looked past her. "I'll be back late," she said, voice sweet like poisoned honey. Or not at all, I muttered without looking up from the book I wasn't even reading. She paused. I could feel her standing there, trying to figure out if that was a joke, a threat, or just the sound of the trap door creaking open beneath her feet. I didn't clarify, just turned the page. She left anyway, slamming the door just a little too hard. That night, I folded the laundry. Hers too. Placed everything neatly in drawers. She always hated that I folded the shirts too square. Said it made everything look like a store display. But I liked it that way. Order, symmetry, control. When she came back at 1:47 a.m., I know because I'd memorized the rhythm of her steps, I was already in bed, lights out, facing the wall. She crept in like a teenager who missed curfew, reeking of cheap vodka and something darker underneath. She slipped under the covers without a word. She waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then, "You awake?" Silence. Then a fake little laugh. "You're really not going to say anything, are you?" Nothing. She turned away, probably thinking she'd won. That I was emotionally paralyzed. That I was still the Eric who'd crawl back to her with apologetic roses and some TED Talk quote about forgiveness. But the truth was far crueler. I had things to say. I just didn't need her to hear them. Because she wasn't the audience anymore. She was the lesson. And I wanted her to keep smiling, keep playing queen in a kingdom already set to burn. Because the longer she danced in the illusion of power, the more satisfying it would be when she realized. She'd been performing for no one. It was a Saturday morning when I disappeared. No warning. No big fight. No final monologue. I left her a text at 7:12 a.m., just as I pulled onto the freeway. "Gone for a few days. Don't wait up." That was it. No punctuation. No emoji. Just a flat line. Rachel saw it 20 minutes later. I know because she called. Twice. No voicemail. Just the missed calls, like she was checking to see if the world still orbited around her. It didn't. She sent a laughing emoji afterward, classic Rachel. Thought it was a bluff. Probably rolled her eyes, muttered "drama queen" under her breath, and got back in bed like I'd be home by dinner. She didn't realize I'd packed the night before. Every motion quiet. Every item chosen with surgical precision. Gym clothes, business casual, 2 pairs of shoes, that old leather journal I hadn't touched in years. I left my ring on the dresser. Not as a message. Just because it no longer belonged to me. Where did I go? Nowhere dramatic. A corporate suite I booked under my middle name. Clean sheets. Cold air conditioning. A window that overlooked nothing in particular, which was exactly what I needed. Nothingness. Silence. A reboot. The first night, I just slept. 8 full hours without her rustling in the sheets or mumbling half-drunk apologies to ghosts she never intended to stop summoning. By the second day, I bought a new phone. New number. Old contacts deleted, except the ones that mattered. Natalie, my brother, the IT guy from work who owed me 3 favors and didn't ask questions. By the 4th day, I had a routine. Wake up, gym, coffee shop, co-working space. I was technically on vacation, but I worked harder than I had in years. Productive, focused, surgical. I started writing things down. Plans. Names. Details. I bought a burner email. Created 2 folders, next steps and exit strategy. Natalie texted once. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. You look lighter. I stared at that line for a long time. Lighter. Yeah, that's what shedding rot feels like. Meanwhile, Rachel's messages started shifting tone. First it was playful. Okay, you've made your point. Come home, Mr. Mysterious. Then mildly annoyed. This is childish, Eric. I'm not playing these games. Then worried. Where are you? Seriously, are you okay? I read everyone. Never responded. Her panic grew in silence. She had lived her entire life believing attention equals control. Without an audience, she unraveled. Week 2, she messaged my brother. He replied with 2 words. He's fine. Which was true. I was better than fine. I was clarifying. She tried reaching out to my job. HR told her I was taking personal leave. That's all she got. Because this time, I locked every door before I walked away. She wasn't worried about my well-being. Not really. She was worried about what I might be planning. But she couldn't ask. Because then she'd have to admit she knew there was something to be afraid of. And Rachel? Rachel still believed she had time. That the music hadn't stopped yet. That this was all just a dramatic phase I'd get over once she pulled the right emotional string. But what she didn't know was that the theater was closed. The lights were off. And the stage was already burning. It started with a photo. Just one. I uploaded it on a Thursday evening. A shot Natalie took of me on some rooftop downtown, city lights behind us, sunset, making everything look too cinematic to be real. I was mid-laugh, holding a glass of something amber, in a blazer I hadn't worn since our 3rd anniversary dinner, back when Rachel still pretended to see me. The caption was simple. Clarity. It took her 11 minutes to view it. I could see the read timestamp from a mutual friend's story she never thought I'd still be connected to. 3 days later, I posted again. This time, it was me and Natalie in front of a mural. We weren't holding hands. We weren't kissing. But the way her head leaned slightly into me, the way I looked down at her like I actually gave a damn, that image said more than any caption could. Still, I added one. Some people teach you pain. Others remind you you're still worth hearing. Rachel didn't comment, but I knew she saw it. I imagined her thumb pausing mid-scroll, jaw tightening, heart skipping the beat she didn't know she still had reserved for me. Her own social media went quiet. Suddenly no more filtered brunch selfies. No late-night girls-only boomerangs. No vague quotes about growth and freedom. Just static. Then, the text came again. So, Natalie, huh? I left it on read. You're dating her now? Still nothing. It's kinda soon, don't you think? That one made me smile. Soon. As if there was still a we she had rights to. As if her late-night rides with Ben didn't count because they were done in secrecy. As if betrayal was less real if you whispered it. Then came the voicemail. Her voice had changed. Tight, uncertain. Eric, I know I hurt you. But this? Posting pictures with some coworker like everything's fine? This isn't you. You don't do revenge. Wrong. I don't do cheap revenge. What I do now, that's reconstruction. I don't torch the bridge. I build a better one, on the other side of the river. A week later, I posted a video clip. Just a few seconds. Natalie and I at some beachside cafe. She's laughing, hand over her mouth. My sunglasses are crooked. I'm making some dumb joke. The moment wasn't staged. It was just real. And real is lethal to someone who's built her world on appearances. Rachel didn't text again that night. But the next morning, she showed up at my old gym. Didn't say anything. Just stood near the front desk, pretending to scroll her phone while I finished my set. I walked past her. Didn't flinch. She turned to speak. Mouth open, some rehearsed line ready to go. I lifted one hand in a lazy wave, not even turning fully. Her eyes followed me all the way out, and I could feel it from 20 feet away. For the first time since her little, I was just bored speech. Rachel was no longer sure she had the upper hand. Because now, she wasn't watching a man in pain. She was watching a man who looked free. The first text came at 2:08 a.m. Can we talk? No punctuation. Like she was afraid even the period might push me further away. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I'd finally reached a place where her words didn't pull at me anymore. They just floated. Meaningless pixels. By morning, there were 2 more. I know things got messy. I just want to understand what you're feeling. Ah, now she wants to understand. After months of rewriting reality with her glass of wine and smug little smirks, suddenly she's interested in the emotional weather report. I archived the thread. A few days later, she tried voicemail. I didn't know people still used voicemail until I saw the notification. I almost deleted it without listening. But curiosity won. Hey, I'm not even sure why I'm calling, really. You're still my husband, Eric. That has to mean something, right? There it was. That tone. The half-whisper, half-plea. The same voice she used when she lost her keys or broke a wine glass and wanted me to pretend I didn't notice. You're still my husband. No apology. No admission. Just a passive reminder that a piece of paper still said we shared a last name. What she didn't grasp, what she couldn't afford to grasp, was that marriage isn't a contract of convenience. It's a commitment of presence. And she had left the building long before I ever did. Now, it was just her echo, trying to bounce off walls that no longer held any shape. Another text, 2 days later. Do you still love me? I stared at that one longer than the rest. Not because I needed to think about it, but because the question was so sad. She wanted a yes, or a no. Anything that meant she still existed in the story. But I didn't answer. Because silence, now, was not revenge. It was truth. The truth that I wasn't in the room anymore. That she was talking to a ghost. A body she hollowed out and now wanted to refill because Ben turned out to be just another dopamine dealer who ran out of stock. She tried liking one of my photos with Natalie. No comment, just a quiet thumbs up like that would get her invited back into the conversation. I untagged her from every photo we'd ever been in. Every beach trip, every Christmas, every blurred shot from some friend's wedding. I deleted our anniversary video. Not archived. Deleted. That was the moment it clicked for her. Because the next message didn't come through text. It came through a mutual friend who called and said, "Dude, Rachel's freaking out. She says you're acting like she doesn't exist." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was accurate. She didn't exist. Not in my world. Not in my heart. Not in the version of the future I was building with steady hands and brutal peace. She was still playing chess with an empty chair. And she was finally starting to feel the silence claw back. It happened on a Thursday. Downtown bistro, the kind of place where the lighting makes everyone look like they have something to celebrate. Natalie picked it. She liked the wine list and the jazz trio that played real instruments, not just synth pads. I wore a suit. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Midnight navy, tailored sharp, pocket square folded like I gave a damn. The kind of fit that says, this man rebuilt himself from bone fragments and spreadsheets, and now he smells like quiet vengeance and bergamot. We were already seated when I saw her. Rachel, 2 tables away, a friend on each side. Hair done, red dress too tight for her age bracket, fake laugh echoing off the white brick wall. I clocked her the moment we walked in, but I said nothing. Natalie touched my hand. You good? I nodded. Perfect. We sat, ordered, laughed. Real laughter, the kind that feels earned. Then the moment came. Rachel turned. She didn't recognize me at first. Her eyes skimmed right past, like a security camera that hadn't adjusted focus. Then, like a delayed reaction, the neurons fired. Her mouth froze mid-sentence. Her wine glass hovered mid-air. Her friend nudged her. Ratch. The glass slipped. It didn't shatter, just hit the edge of the table, cracked, spilled red across the linen like a wound blooming slow and wide. She stared at me. Not Natalie. Not the table. Me. I met her gaze with the same look I'd perfected in the mirror. Calm. Polite. Slightly amused. Like she was an acquaintance whose name I couldn't quite recall. Natalie leaned in. whispering something about the dessert menu. I smiled at her, genuine, full, and reached across the table to brush her hand. Rachel saw it. Her breath hitched. You know that sound people make when their lungs forget the choreography? That little hiccup of disbelief when reality doesn't align with the narrative they wrote in their head? That's what came out of her. Then the whispering began. Her friends noticed. Heads turned. Someone whispered her name. She straightened up like she could still regain control of the scene. But the scene didn't belong to her. Not anymore. She stood, one heel trembling, took one step toward our table. Natalie looked up. Do you know her? I didn't look away from Rachel. Just sipped my wine and said, used to. Rachel opened her mouth, closed it. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything that could collapse this moment into an apology or a scream or an ugly, public reclamation of what she used to own. But she had no words. Because in front of her wasn't the broken man she left behind on that quiet night when she said she was just bored. In front of her was a man who had upgraded himself so far beyond her reach, she couldn't even hate him properly. She stood there, blinking, as the red wine soaked through her dress. And I swear to God, it was the most peaceful moment of my life. She followed us out. The restaurant doors swung closed behind her like they were trying to keep the disaster in. Her heels clicked too fast against the pavement, the kind of pace people walk when they're losing something they thought was guaranteed. Eric, she called out. I kept walking. Natalie was at my side, soft grip on my arm, eyes forward. Composed. She didn't know the whole story, but she knew enough to stay silent when ghosts came calling. Eric, please. That voice. Cracked. Hollow. The same voice she used the night her father died. Raw. Stripped of vanity. It might have hurt once. It didn't now. I turned. She stopped about 6 feet away. That distance was deliberate. Her hair was frizzing in the humidity. Her mascara had started to smudge just under her left eye. She didn't notice. Can we please just talk? She asked, clutching her purse like it might anchor her to something solid. I looked at her like you look at someone you buried a long time ago who just happens to still be walking around. Talk? I said, smiling politely. Sure. I've got one sentence for you. She blinked. Waited. I stepped a little closer, not threatening, just close enough to make it count. I was bored too, I said softly, but I didn't ruin us because of it. Her mouth opened like a door she wasn't ready to walk through. But nothing came out. No apology. No defense. No spin. Just that dead silence between a punch and the blood. Then Natalie gently tugged my hand. Come on, she said. Let's not waste the night. I nodded. We turned. Rachel stood there alone, staring at the sidewalk like it had answers. Like somewhere in the cracks of concrete she'd find the moment she lost me. Not the day she cheated. Not the night she laughed off my silence. But this one. Right now. The moment she realized I'd heard her excuse. And weaponized it better than she ever could. It showed up in the mail 5 days later. No fanfare. No warning. A plain envelope. Thick stock. No handwriting. Just a printed label with her name. Rachel Halpern. Still using my last name. Cute. She probably thought it was some boring financial document or tax nonsense I'd forgotten to sign. Until she opened it. Inside, one crisp letter, single-spaced, laser-sharp. The tone? Corporate. Brutally efficient. Written by my lawyer, but edited by me. Every line carved like a blade. This letter serves as formal notice that your divorce has been finalized. As per the agreement, there will be no spousal support, no further claims, and no retained shared assets aside from what is already itemized and delivered. Please refer to the attached documentation for confirmation. No regret. No, we wish you the best. Just a sterile execution. But the real gift came with the second item inside the envelope. A black matte frame. Sleek. Heavy. The kind of thing you'd expect to hold a diploma or an award. But inside, a printed screenshot. Her first message to Ben. The one that started it all. I still remember it from the reflection I caught on her screen that night over wine. Haha, I need something exciting, face blowing a kiss. He never notices anything. Timestamp and all. October 3rd, 9:17 p.m. And below it, no caption, no commentary. Just that message, frozen forever. A relic of her arrogance. She would have opened it alone. Probably in the kitchen. Maybe still in that robe she wore the night She told me she was just bored. The irony probably didn't even sting right away. But it would, because it wasn't anger anymore. It was closure without kindness. No screaming, no begging, no final fight. Just a quiet "you chose this," wrapped in paper and ink. I heard later from a mutual friend that she tried to call her lawyer twice that night, asking if there was anything that could be contested. There wasn't. I'd outmaneuvered her in the same silence she thought made me weak. And the best part? That frame, custom-made, engraved on the back, in small silver lettering. You never noticed anything. She saw the photo late at night, the way you always find the things that hurt you most, accidentally, while trying not to think. Instagram. Explore tab. A friend of a friend, reshared from someone she hadn't unfollowed yet. Eric and Natalie, standing in front of a cabin somewhere green and quiet. A lake behind them, barely rippling. He had his arm around her. She had her head on his shoulder. They weren't posing. They weren't trying. They just were. That was the part that gutted her. Because the smile on his face wasn't revenge. It wasn't the smug satisfaction of someone who'd won. It was worse. It was peace. The caption read, "Peace looks good on you." It wasn't tagged to him, but it didn't need to be. She tapped the image, zoomed in, studied his face. That jawline that had sharpened. That posture that no longer bent toward people who didn't deserve him. His eyes weren't cold. They were free. Rachel sat there in her kitchen, the same chair where she once told him she was just bored. The same table where her phone had lit up with Ben's name while she sipped her wine and stabbed at her marriage with a butter knife. She hadn't heard from Ben in weeks. She hadn't told anyone. It wasn't the kind of failure you share. Rachel clicked on the photo, then clicked again. Nothing happened. She wasn't following Natalie. Couldn't comment. Couldn't touch it. So she stared. The ice cubes in her drink had melted. The condensation soaked the napkin beneath the glass. She placed her phone down, screen side down, and for the first time since she'd lost him, truly lost him, not the night he walked out, but the moment he stopped seeing her as something worth answering, she felt the absence. Not the kind that screams, the kind that echoes. No calls, no messages, no angry letters, just nothing. Rachel looked around the kitchen. The chair across from her was empty. It would stay that way. She turned off the light, walked down the hall, and went to bed alone. Again. The necklace was sterling silver with a small sapphire teardrop, delicate, understated, the kind of gift someone gives when they've paid attention over the years. He'd spent weeks choosing it, even made a special trip across town to the old jeweler his wife once said reminded her of Paris. The box was wrapped in dark green velvet. He handed it to her after dinner, quietly, with a soft, "Happy birthday, Em." She didn't look him in the eyes when she opened it. Her friends leaned in, cooing at the sparkle, but Emily just laughed, not with joy, but that dry, performative laugh people use when they're performing for an audience. Then she said it. "He's not my dad. He's just the guy who paid for everything." A few of her friends giggled like it was a TikTok punchline. One even muttered, "Goals." Then came the real dagger. Her mother, his wife of 18 years, smirked and added, "Well, she's not wrong." They didn't know he was standing behind the doorway, that he heard every syllable, that he was holding the cake knife in his hand, not for drama, but because he'd gone back to the kitchen to get a second plate for her favorite lemon tort. He stood there for a few seconds longer than he should have. Not long enough to cry, but long enough for something else to take root. Not rage, not even sadness, just a quiet erasure. Like someone had drawn a line through the last 2 decades of his life and wrote in red ink at the top, "Irrelevant." He walked back in, placed the plate beside the girls, and said nothing. They didn't notice the stiffness in his movements, or how carefully he was avoiding his wife's eyes. Emily was already busy uploading a photo of the necklace with the caption, "Gifted wrap gift #blessed." No mention of who gave it. That night, after they all went to bed, he cleaned up the plates, washed the glasses, took the recycling out. He didn't sleep, not because of heartbreak, but because he had decisions to make. At 2:17 a.m., he opened the cabinet in the den and pulled out a small fireproof safe. Inside were 3 things: a notarized copy of his will, a sealed envelope labeled "For When It Matters," and a USB drive labeled version 3. He inserted the drive into his laptop, opened the contents, double-checked that everything was still there, scanned documents, dated photos, video snippets with exact timestamps, and a text file titled, "What You Didn't Know." He copied everything to his second drive, sealed it in a padded envelope, wrote the address in neat, careful handwriting, not to a lawyer, not to a family member, but to someone from a different life, someone who owed him a favor. At 3:40 a.m., he placed his house keys gently on the kitchen table, next to an empty coffee mug and a napkin with a smudge of lipstick that wasn't his wife's. Then he walked out. No one heard the door close, not even the dog. What they didn't know was that he wasn't running. He wasn't breaking. He was extracting himself, cleanly, like a surgeon removing a tumor with steady hands. The first morning in the new town, he woke up to the sound of pigeons fighting on the fire escape and the distant whir of a delivery truck backing into the alley. The apartment wasn't much, just a converted studio above an old photo restoration shop run by a man named Curtis, who smoked cigars and didn't ask questions. It smelled faintly of fixer fluid and worn leather. Perfect. He paid 3 months up front. Cash. No ID required. When Curtis asked what brought him there, he just said, "Cleaning up a long exposure." The old man didn't press. He just handed him a key and muttered, "Dark rooms in the back if you need it." For the next 3 weeks, he didn't check his phone. He didn't log into any accounts. He didn't even glance at the news. What he did was simple. He disappeared in plain sight. During the day, he worked in the shop, officially unpaid, unofficially indispensable. Customers brought in old prints with torn edges, sun-bleached portraits, wedding photos from the 80s that needed to be rescued from time's decay. He cataloged, scanned, adjusted lighting, repaired smiles, restored eyes. Curtis called him the Ghost Whisperer. But in the back room, behind a locked cabinet and under a stack of meaningless invoices, was his collection. Albums he brought from the house. Boxes of negatives his wife thought had been lost in a flood. Scans of old videotapes. Backup drives. He had once offered to digitize their family memories as a gift. She declined. Said it was too much effort for things nobody looks at anymore. She had no idea how wrong she was, because what he was building now wasn't just a slideshow. It was a mosaic, a precise reconstruction of select family history, reordered, recontextualized, enhanced, with surgical attention to lighting, framing, and embedded metadata. He wasn't editing images. He was writing a silent confession with pixels and timestamps. He started with her childhood photos, the ones from long before he entered the picture, the ones he'd never been allowed to touch. Buried in the crawl space under the attic stairs, marked private. He remembered the day he found them 2 years ago, when the water heater broke and he had to replace the insulation. She wasn't home. He pried the box open and saw albums labeled with dates that made no sense. Photos of her mother in places she claimed never to have visited. Men she said were just old coworkers. One in particular showed up more than once. Tall, sharp jawline, always a hand on her back. In every photo, his face was slightly turned, but the resemblance to Emily was uncanny. Too uncanny. Back then, he hadn't had the heart to investigate. But now, that man became the centerpiece. He blew up a grainy photo of the two of them on a beach. Ran it through enhancement filters. Not for clarity, but for the metadata. The camera used. The time it was taken. The location stamped in the corner from an old GPS-enabled Fujifilm model. Then he matched the date to a series of receipts and bank statements his wife once tossed in a shoebox. She thought he never looked through her office trash. She thought he was too nice to pry. But he remembered everything. She always claimed Emily was conceived during a hard time, when she was alone and recovering from a breakup. But the timeline didn't hold up. Especially not once he found the receipt for a stay at a boutique hotel in Providence. Same week, same man, same red blouse. The man she used to work for. The one she never named. The one who funded Emily's tuition anonymously. He started laying it all out. The photos, the metadata, the receipts, the emails. A private archive no one knew existed. Not even her. Because this wasn't just about revenge. It was about proof. About making sure the next time someone smirked and called him just the guy who paid, the silence that followed would scream louder than any denial. And he still had one final card left to play. But not yet. Timing was everything. She always denied there was anyone serious before him. Just a few flings, she used to say, sipping her wine, twirling the stem between her fingers like it was nothing. He believed her. Mostly because he wanted to. because he thought that maybe, just maybe, he was the one who arrived at the right time, the one who helped her rebuild her life after whatever heartbreak had come before. But then came that photo. It was tucked in the back of an old brown leather album, one of the few boxes she never let him touch when they moved into the house together. She'd labeled it Office Archive, and he always assumed it was full of spreadsheets and resumes from her early career. But inside, sandwiched between blurry shots of office Christmas parties and some photocopied memos, was the photo that turned his stomach. She was pregnant, visibly, standing beside a man in a dark pinstripe suit, one arm gently resting on her swollen belly. They were smiling, but not at the camera, at each other. Her hair was shorter then, her eyes a bit softer, but unmistakably her. The blouse she was wearing blood-red silk, low cut, same one she once told him she'd donated to Goodwill because it reminded her of a bad night. That was a lie. The man beside her looked familiar, but he couldn't place it at first. Then he glanced again. It wasn't just the cheekbones or the shape of the jaw. It was the eyes. That same flat, calculating stare her daughter had when she was pretending to listen but already measuring you for your usefulness. He'd seen that look across the dinner table for years and told himself it was teenage attitude. But here it was again in a man's face, frozen in time. He flipped the photo over. In faded ink, September 2000, Cape Elizabeth, Promotion Week. Promotion. That's when the puzzle cracked open. He scanned the image into his workstation, cleaned the contrast, and ran the embedded metadata. Old digital camera, early Sony model. Surprisingly detailed. Location confirmed. Timestamp, September 12, 2000, for 13 p.m. Emily was born in early May 2001. He started cross-referencing. Dug into his files, the ones his wife used to call your little accounting hobby. He pulled old tax returns, her W-2s, HR emails from back when she forwarded every damn thing to their shared inbox, thinking it made her look responsible. That's when the name popped up again. Bonus signed off by GL at corporate. Congrats on the new role. Glenn was impressed. Glenn. He remembered that name. Her boss. The one she said was a creep and best forgotten. The same man she swore had nothing to do with her personal life. He Googled him. Now semi-retired. A philanthropist. Donor to 2 private universities. Married, publicly. With a charity fund in his and his wife's name. That same fund, he confirmed through a buried PDF on the university's endowment site, had a line item labeled, Special Alumni Family Grant, discreet. Amount, $118,000. Recipient ID, masked. Year, 2019. Emily's freshman year. He leaned back in the chair, heart pounding not from rage, but from the cold, exacting high of confirmation. She'd lied. The grant, they toasted with champagne, the one she said came out of nowhere, total blessing, wasn't anonymous generosity. It was a carefully planted seed from a man she thought she'd buried in her past, a man who clearly hadn't forgotten her. He reopened the image on the screen. Zoomed in. Not on them. On the background. Behind the couple, barely visible through the restaurant's glass wall, was a street sign. He enhanced it. Commercial Street. And below it? A reflection. A man holding a camera. Her husband's breath caught. It wasn't just a photo of her and Glenn. It was a photo taken by someone else. Someone she trusted enough to capture that moment. Someone who kept copies. Someone who might have more. He pulled the second album from the same box and found another note tucked between pages. An envelope. On it, in her handwriting, for Emily, when she's ready. He didn't open it. Not yet. He had everything he needed for now. The timeline had taken shape. The face behind the lie had a name. And the man they all thought had vanished? He was just getting started. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Off-white cardstock with embossed gold lettering. A thin swirl of faux luxury pretension that tried too hard. He recognized the handwriting instantly, Emily's tight, controlled cursive that had once scribbled Father's Day cards, back when she still called him Pops to get money for gas. He opened it without curiosity. He already knew what it was. You're welcome to attend, but please no drama. That line was the punchline. The sheer gall of it. No greeting. No warmth. No, we'd love to have you. Just a sterile, performative invitation. Like she was sending it to the mailman who used to wave at her from the porch. You're welcome to attend. Like this wasn't the man who paid for her braces, her therapy, her car. Like he was some extended relative who should feel honored to sit in the back row. And the kicker? The RSVP card. Not father of the bride. Just guest. Name line left blank. Checkbox. Attendance optional. He didn't burn it. Didn't rip it up. He simply set it on the edge of his desk, next to the digital frame where no new photos had been added in years. Instead, he flipped the card over. Small print at the bottom, under the venue details and plated meal options. Photography by Silverline Studio. Travis Edmonds, creative director. Bingo. He opened his laptop and typed the name. Silverline was mid-tier. Local, competent, affordable. The kind of vendor a bride picks because the photos look clean. No artistic soul. Just filters, symmetry, and drone shots. Perfect. He called the studio and asked for Travis. Said he was a family member. Said he wanted to talk about a small addition to the visual narrative. Travis was polite, cautious, curious. I'm not sure we allow family input on the final slideshow, sir. Most of the creative process is between me and the couple. That's fine, he said. I'm not here to make requests. I'm here to make an offer. Travis paused, then coughed. I'm listening. He didn't launch into explanations. He didn't tell a sob story. He simply emailed a password-protected folder titled Wedding Material _alt sequence.zip and a separate PDF with a signed one-page contract. Travis opened the folder while they were still on the phone. Silence. Are these personal photos? Authentic ones. All dated. All verified. No edits needed. You just need to insert them into the final slideshow. Travis cleared his throat. I don't know if that aligns with what the bride. It doesn't matter if it does, he interrupted calmly. Because if you check the contract, you'll see Clause 7A, final creative decisions remain confidential and at the sole discretion of the visual director unless specified in writing by the paying client. Travis opened the PDF, scanned, and saw the attached check image, $14,200. More than what the entire wedding had likely paid for his services. There was a pause. Then Travis said, slowly, I assume you want this embedded somewhere, discreet? He chuckled. I want it at the perfect time. He gave him the sequence, the setup, the crescendo, the transition point, where the background music would swell, where childhood nostalgia would peak, right before it snapped. He didn't want gore. He didn't want spectacle. He wanted truth. Served cold. Served clean. This isn't sabotage, he said, before ending the call. This is correction. Travis didn't reply. But 2 hours later, a secure confirmation link appeared in his inbox. The contract was signed. The files were received. And the man the bride thought had gone ghost? He had just paid for the final word. The ceremony was a Pinterest fever dream. Draped linen arches, mason jar lanterns, overpriced wildflowers pretending to be casual. A rented vineyard with Instagram corners carefully curated to look spontaneous. Emily wore a custom dress that cost more than most people's cars. Also, she could walk down an aisle lined with people she didn't respect, toward a man she'd known for 18 months and would swear she loved since forever. She'd insisted on a slideshow, a family journey, she called it, because she wanted to feel legacy. Her groom, Connor, was all in. They gave the photographer full creative control, told him to make it beautiful, nostalgic, surprising. When Travis suggested they preview it, Emily waved it off with a glass of Prosecco and said, Nah, we trust you. Surprise is part of the magic. Oh, there'd be magic all right. The lights dimmed right after the officiant's opening remarks. Soft piano music drifted in. The screen flickered on, and the first photo faded in. Emily as a toddler, frosting on her cheeks. Cue the obligatory off from the crowd. Then came the beach photos. Her with a floaty. Her mother in oversized sunglasses. High school prom. Graduation. Her first car. A short clip of her walking across the stage, throwing her cap, the whole room clapping. Her mother, Denise, sat front row, dabbing at her eyes like it was a soap opera and she was the star. Her husband, no, ex-husband now, was not there. Of course. She had told everyone he'd had a midlife spiral, that he left them, that he was too sensitive for family life. The slideshow continued. Photos of Emily and her mom, laughing on a ski trip. One of Connor kissing her on the cheek at a football game. The soundtrack shifted slightly, warmer, swelling. People smiled. One bridesmaid sniffled. Then the transition. The next image faded in. Not a childhood photo. Not filtered or cropped. A candid shot, older, grainy, dated. Denise, heavily pregnant, standing beside a man no one in the crowd recognized. His hand was on her stomach. She was wearing a red blouse. The air in the venue shifted. Subtle. People tilted their heads. Then, a subtle overlay bloomed on the corner of the screen. Location: Cape Elizabeth. Date: September 12, 2000. Time: for 13 p.m. Another image appeared. Same couple. The man kissing Denise's cheek. Denise laughing. Then the music stopped. The screen went black for a breath. Then a title card. Truth always finds the light. The room went still. Connor's smile faltered. Denise's tissue froze mid-dab. Someone in the back whispered, "Wait, what?" Another slide. A scanned document. Sharp, clinical. A DNA test envelope. Front and center. Not opened, but labeled. With two names. Subject A, Emily R. Subject B, Glenn T. The photographer had obeyed to the letter. No drama, no narration, no voiceover. Just images. Images that told a story louder than any microphone ever could. Emily froze at the altar, bouquet trembling. Her knuckles white around the stems. Connor turned toward her slowly, his face cycling through disbelief, calculation, and a flicker of something colder. Denise's face drained of color. Her lips moved, but no sound came. And still the slideshow continued, unhurried, merciless. The scream ripped through the ceremony like glass shattering under pressure. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was feral, an unfiltered, primal sound that snapped everyone's attention toward the altar. Emily's voice cracked in the middle of the shriek. "What is that? Turn it off. Turn it off, right now." Connor, still standing beside her, had instinctively taken a step back. His boutonniere tilted slightly. "What the hell is this, Emily?" I didn't, her voice buckled. "Who did this?" Guests turned to each other, eyes wide, some mouths hanging open, others trying, and failing, to suppress their phones. Denise, front row center, made a move like she was going to stand up and say something authoritative. But then she saw it. The red blouse. The timestamp. The man with his hand on her belly. The unmistakable envelope that should have never seen the light of day. Her knees bent, and she sat right back down without saying a word. Her fingers clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. The silence lasted 2 seconds. Then murmurs. Then whispers growing louder, fracturing into gasps. Someone near the back muttered, "Is that her real dad?" A woman whispered to her husband, "Did you see that name on the envelope?" An elderly aunt asked, far too loudly, "What does it mean?" Connor's mother looked ready to march up to the altar herself, but her husband grabbed her wrist, eyes locked on the screen, expression unreadable. Emily's legs buckled. A bridesmaid caught her by the elbow before she collapsed. The bouquet hit the floor and scattered rose petals across the aisle like a crime scene dressed in florals. "Turn it off," she screamed again, this time at the tech booth. But the technician was already scrambling. Sweat pouring. The keyboard frozen. The clicker not responding. The projector, locked by auto sequence, continued the final slide rotation. So someone, likely a groomsman, judging by the ill-fitted suit and panicked urgency, bolted to the front and yanked the power cable. The screen went black. Too late. Phones were already up. Videos captured. The envelope. The timestamp. The title card. Truth always finds the light. At least 5 people had already posted it. One of them with the caption, "This wedding just exploded. No cap." Denise turned to her daughter, her voice low and shaking. "Who gave you that slideshow?" Emily didn't answer, because she already knew. It wasn't Travis. It wasn't the tech team. It was someone else. Someone who hadn't been invited. Someone who, despite their absence, now stood ghost-like in every stunned breath, in every pair of eyes darting from screen to bride to mother and back again. The man they once laughed at for being just the guy who paid. The man who hadn't said a word, but had finally been heard. He sat in a cracked vinyl booth at a roadside diner called Helen's Junction, 2 states over, just as he had for the past 8 Saturdays. The coffee here was bitter, and the waitress called everyone Han, like she'd survived 3 divorces and didn't believe in fairy tales anymore. He liked that about her. She brought the pot over without asking and left him alone. Outside, the wind stirred dead leaves in lazy circles. The world kept turning, unaware that a wedding back in Maple Ridge was currently imploding in real time. His phone was face up beside his plate, muted but vibrating in little bursts. Notifications kept stacking. You need to see this. Isn't this your family? Dude, what the hell? He ignored all of them. Instead, he opened a live video someone had posted to their story, someone too stunned by the chaos to realize their camera was still rolling. The image was shaky, sideways. Screams in the background. People talking over one another. Someone crying. Someone else laughing nervously. And there, faint but unmistakable, was Emily's voice. High, strained, almost choking. He turned the volume down even lower. There was something almost biblical about it, like watching a forest fire through glass. Destruction at a safe distance. Controlled detonation. The waitress came by, smacking her gum. You good, sugar? He didn't look up from the phone, just stirred his coffee slowly, clockwise, until the spoon rang against the sides of the mug like a tiny bell. Then he said, in a voice as even as the linoleum tiles under his feet, "Can I get that slice of lemon pie now?" She blinked. That time already? He nodded. Coming right up, she said, walking off. He never smiled. Not once. This wasn't joy. It wasn't gloating. It was release, a slow, quiet exhale after 23 years of holding it in. No celebration. No champagne. Just the final click of a lock he'd been waiting years to close. In the video, he caught a glimpse of Connor, confused, defensive, trying to hold it together. Good luck, kid, he thought. You signed up for a fairy tale built on a forged birth certificate and a mother who weaponized silence better than any man he'd ever met. His eyes shifted to Denise in the video. Frozen, like someone had just told her the walls were made of mirrors, and she finally saw her own reflection. The same woman who used to hiss things like, "You're too sensitive," or "Don't make it about you," every time he tried to connect with Emily. Who once told a friend at brunch, loud enough for him to overhear, that men just want credit for doing the bare minimum. The irony, of course, was that he never wanted credit. He wanted truth. Truth that couldn't be buried in birthday wrapping paper or plastered over with fake smiles at graduation. Truth that had now bloomed, mid-ceremony, in front of God, guests, and every nosy classmate who followed Emily on Instagram. He sipped his coffee. Bitter. Just how he liked it. The slice of pie arrived. Bright yellow. Tart. Perfect. He cut into it slowly, the metal of the fork tapping lightly against the plate. Back in Maple Ridge, people were scrambling. Whispers turning into confrontation. Reputation into rubble. But here, just lemon pie, a warm mug, and peace that had nothing to prove. The screen dimmed. He locked the phone and slipped it back into his jacket. The man they thought had disappeared? He'd simply relocated to where the silence could finally speak louder than anything they'd ever said. The reception was supposed to be held in the Vineyard Hall, with string lights and acoustic covers of love songs playing softly through the speakers. Instead, by 7:15 p.m., the tables were bare, the champagne flutes untouched, and the venue staff stood awkwardly in the corners, holding platters of untouched hors d'oeuvres like undertakers at a wedding wake. The official word from the planner was technical difficulties. But the guests weren't buying it, not after what they'd seen on the screen, and definitely not after Emily's unhinged scream was echoed and reposted in real time across every group chat in the room. The clip was under 60 seconds, just enough to catch the title card, the image of the DNA envelope, and her staggering, half-sob demand. Turn it off. Who did this? By 8:30 p.m., the groom was gone. Connor didn't say goodbye, didn't issue a statement. He simply packed a duffel bag, checked out of the hotel, and drove off in the rental car. A groomsman saw him pulling out of the parking lot, jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. His parents were furious. Not confused. Not sad. Furious. They'd spent thousands helping fund this storybook weekend, flying in from 3 states away. Now, they wanted answers, real ones. Why had the bride's paternity been a secret? Who was the man in the photo? Why was their son now at the center of something that looked like a paternity courtroom scandal? Emily didn't answer anyone. She locked herself in the bridal suite bathroom with the lights off. cried for hours, then fell silent. The maid of honor knocked every 20 minutes until she gave up. Denise, meanwhile, went into damage control mode. She tried to assure guests that it was just a mix-up, that the slideshow company had included a private family photo by mistake. But no one believed her, especially not the aunt who screamed across the wine bar, "A mistake doesn't have metadata, Denise." And the worst part? It wasn't contained. Because somewhere in the swirl of posts, likes, and whispers, someone finally recognized the man in the photo with the red blouse and the hand on Denise's belly. A former coworker. A woman who used to temp in Glenn's department in the early 2000s. She commented on a viral post. "Isn't that Glenn T? That guy used to be a director at Levitt Corp. That's wild." The tag came minutes later. Then the DM. Then another post. A current photo of Glenn, older, heavier, but unmistakably the same man. Beside him, a smiling wife. 2 teenage sons. The internet made short work of the mystery. And somewhere across the city, Glenn was sitting in his own backyard, beer in hand, grilling steaks, when his phone started blowing up with messages from friends, coworkers, and eventually his wife. Because Glenn had no idea he had a daughter. Until now. And unlike Denise, Glenn's wife wasn't the type to bury things. She read the envelope. She zoomed in on the caption. She called her lawyer. By 10:15 p.m., the slideshow wasn't just a wedding scandal. It was a bomb dropped on 2 families. And the man who paid for everything? He didn't post a thing. Didn't comment. Didn't gloat. He just watched from afar, calm as ever. Because truth, once set free, doesn't need backup. It just needs time. His phone lit up for 3 straight days. Blocked numbers. No numbers. One of them, Denise's, cycled through 6 different area codes in what he assumed was an attempt to bypass his silence. Emily's came in flurries. First a few hesitant pings, then a full assault, calls at 1 a.m., for a.m., even a FaceTime request he rejected mid-bite while eating pancakes. He didn't listen to a single voicemail, but he read the transcripts. That was enough. "Please, can we talk? I just need to explain. You didn't have to do this. It was cruel, don't you think? She didn't know, okay? I didn't tell her. I was trying to protect her. Protect her." He snorted at that one, folding laundry in the quiet warmth of his new studio, the hum of the dryer soothing. She protected Emily like someone protects a lie, by locking it in a box and pretending it was love. The calls from Emily came next. Voice trembling. Not the same arrogant, eye-rolling tone he remembered from the kitchen that night of the birthday party. This voice was thinner. Edges frayed. Fragile in a way that wasn't rehearsed. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. You were the only dad I ever really had, and I'm sorry, okay? Can we just talk? Please." He turned his phone face down and went back to making tea. No rage. No yelling. Just silence. Not absence, presence by subtraction. Denise tried guilt next. "You disgraced her in front of everyone. You humiliated me." Funny how quickly we turned into me. But still, he didn't respond. Instead, he visited the tiny post office in the next town over, the one where no one knew his name, where the clerk wore mismatched socks and never asked questions. He placed 2 envelopes on the counter, both addressed by hand. One to his former home, the other to Emily's apartment in the city. Inside each was a copy of her wedding invitation. The same off-white card with gold trim and hollow civility. But now there was one difference. In the top margin, written in clean, comrade ink. "Next time, remember who paid for the first one." No signature. No return address. He didn't need one. They'd know. They'd open it with hands trembling, mouths open, the room suddenly feeling colder. They'd know exactly what it meant. Not a threat. Not a cry for attention. Just a closing statement. The final period at the end of a sentence they thought he'd never finish writing. And miles away, while they stood surrounded by ruin, staring at invitations turned indictments, he stood beneath an autumn sky, sipping coffee on the porch of a place he now called his own. No shared bank account. No step anything. Just him. And the quiet satisfaction of never needing to raise his voice to be heard. The essay dropped without warning. It appeared one morning on a popular visual arts blog, buried between articles about lens upgrades and wedding portrait techniques. No byline. Just the title, framing silence. It started simply. Sometimes, a picture doesn't just say 1,000 words. Sometimes it says one thing permanently. The writer described the moment he was hired. The instruction to insert certain archival materials with precision. The strict contract. The sense that he wasn't documenting a wedding, but delivering a verdict. He never named names. He didn't need to. Because attached to the post, uncredited, uncropped, and undeniably raw, was the final photo from the wedding slideshow. Not a polished glamour shot. Not a glossy magazine ready still. It was the split second after the DNA envelope appeared on screen. Emily stood mid-scream, mouth open, bouquet dangling sideways, mascara already tracking. Her body bent slightly forward, like she was either collapsing or ready to bolt. Connor was frozen half-turned beside her. Not running, not reaching, just witnessing. In the background, flickering on the projector before the blackout, were the words. Truth always finds the light. The shot was perfectly framed, not by accident, but by intention. In that single image, time stopped. There was betrayal, unraveling, revelation. Everything that couldn't be said in family court or therapy or years of silent resentment was there, frozen in shutter speed clarity. The kind of photo no one wanted taken, but everyone remembered forever. It spread like fire. The post got picked up by photography forums, then Reddit, then BuzzFeed. Wedding photo of the year, one headline declared. When the fatherless fairy tale collapsed mid-vow, the comments split down the middle. Some called it cruel. Others called it justice. But all agreed on one thing: someone had planned this. Meticulously. Intimately. With the kind of pain only deep love, betrayal, and silence could create. Back in that small town, the man who paid for the wedding and everything before it didn't read the article. Someone sent it to him. He never opened the link. Instead, he walked down to the print shop near the diner. Asked them to make 111 by 17 matte print. Not framed. He rolled it up. Slid it into a tube. Labeled it in plain block letters. For archive. Then he placed it in the back of his file cabinet, behind the birth certificates, the tax returns, and the letters no one had read. Not for revenge. Not for pride. But because the photo was proof that silence can be louder than shouting, that truth can be wrapped in stillness, and that sometimes the man they dismiss as just the guy who paid turns out to be the only one who paid attention. He never spoke again. Not about them. Didn't need to. Because the world had already seen what he saw long ago. And the image said it all. I walked in holding a brown paper bag with 2 bottles of cranberry juice and a prescription I wasn't supposed to have for another 3 weeks. The doctor had bumped my appointment, said there were markers to monitor. That was his polite way of saying my body was writing checks my spirit couldn't cover forever. So I came home early, needing quiet. A chair. Maybe some old fishing footage on YouTube. Instead, I stepped into a staged intervention, with me as the unwanted guest. They were all there. Dana, on the couch. Megan, legs curled under her, scrolling like it was just another Tuesday. Rebecca with her usual forced smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. And Kyle, my half-brother who once got arrested for trying to return a TV he hadn't paid for, lounging in my armchair, like he'd paid the mortgage and seasoned the oak himself. Nobody noticed me at first. The dog did, but even she didn't bark. Just slunk off like she'd been trained. I was halfway into the living room when Megan looked up and said it, just like she was pointing out the weather. He's our new dad now. She didn't laugh. She didn't flinch. Dana didn't correct her. Rebecca looked down. Kyle? That idiot just gave me a closed-mouth smile like I'd interrupted his Netflix. I blinked. No one moved. My prescription dropped from the bag and clinked against the floor. No one reached for it. Not even Dana. So I stood there, all 63 years of me, watching 4 people pretend I'd never built this life. Never paid the bills. Never scraped blood off my knuckles rewiring half this house. Never watched over them while Dana needed space 3 years ago, which now felt suspiciously like rehearsal. I didn't yell. Didn't ask questions. I just set the bag on the side table and stared at each one of them, long enough to make Megan shift in her seat and Kyle glance away like he forgot his line. Dana finally broke the silence. Thomas, maybe we should... I raised a hand. Not to hit. Not to speak. Just to stop the sound. And it worked. Like magic. Then I turned and walked out the door. No coat. No wallet. No keys. Just the sound of that bottle rolling lazily on hardwood behind me, like the world couldn't decide if I was coming back. Let them sit in it. Let Kyle play house. I'd been preparing for this longer than they knew. I didn't drive fast. I didn't drive far. Just far enough to where the cell towers wouldn't recognize me immediately. I pulled into the back lot of an old mechanic shop that shut down before the pandemic, sat in my truck, engine humming, and stared out at the skeletal husks of stripped cars. I should have been angry. Should have been screaming into the steering wheel or punching the dash like some bruised TV husband who just found out the nanny wasn't the only thing being screwed. But I wasn't angry. I was cold. Because the truth is, I didn't leave in defeat. I left to finish what I started. 3 months ago, Dana started locking her phone. Not the regular, casual kind of locked. No, this was new. She used to hand me her phone to read recipes or check Facebook. Then suddenly, it was upside down on the table every time I entered the room. Then she added facial recognition and kept it clutched like a rosary. I asked once, you hiding something? She rolled her eyes. You're just paranoid. It's the medication. It's making you suspicious. Ah yes. Gaslight 101. She should have known better. Because I might be slow with texting, but I'm not slow with systems. 35 years as an electrician will teach you to notice when a light flickers wrong, when power's flowing somewhere it shouldn't. So I stopped asking questions. Instead, I bought a cheap burner phone from a Walgreens 2 towns over and set up voice-activated recording in my workshop. Not the house, too obvious. But the shed? The one I built myself, where Dana never stepped foot because it smelled like metal? That became my archive. Every time she left the house in a rush, I followed the bank notifications. She thought I didn't know about the joint card she reactivated under Rebecca's name, or that her new yoga class was charged at a hotel bar that didn't have a single mat in sight. I took screenshots, recorded calls, not hers, mine. My own conversations with the bank, the lawyer, the doctor, notarized everything I could, covered every inch of ground while she smirked and texted and whispered. And Kyle? I knew about Kyle before he even slithered back into town. Found a receipt for a wire transfer to his account tucked behind a heating bill. The idiot even signed his own name. Loan repayment. From Dana's personal savings. She was funding the parasite. So no, today wasn't shock. Today was closure. You don't yell at termites. You call the exterminator. And I'd been laying down poison quietly for weeks. As I sat in that truck, I opened the glove compartment, pulled out the old leather binder labeled Fishing Trips 09 to 15. It was never for fishing. Inside were printed PDFs, photo evidence, timelines, even a recorded voicemail from Dana to her sister. Honestly, I think he's slipping. Makes it easier. He won't fight anything. I rewound it, played it again, smiled. They thought they caught me off guard. But this wasn't an ambush. It was a performance. And now the curtain was rising. The shed always smelled like pine and old sweat, with a trace of WD-40 clinging to the air no matter the season. It was the one place I'd built entirely by hand. No contractors, no kits. Just a slab, some framing, and my own blood mixed into the sawdust. I stepped inside and bolted the door behind me. The air was still. Tools lined the walls in perfect rows. They hadn't been used in weeks. Not because I was too sick. Because I was watching. In the far corner behind a shelving unit marked paint and junk, there was a panel with 6 screws. I loosened them slowly, one by one. Behind it, a cavity in the wall, no wider than a backpack. Inside, my version of a safe. It was a weatherproof contractor's box, sealed tight. The label on it said, old wiring diagrams, but the lock was biometric. I placed my thumb on the reader, waited for the green light, and popped it open. No wires. Just war. I pulled out the first folder, legal-sized envelopes, all stamped and sealed. The trust modifications were dated 4 months back, around the time Dana had started leaving overnight without explanation. I'd rerouted the entire structure through a separate management company, co-signed with my former union buddy, Art. If I died, which was looking more like a win, nothing went to her by default. The second folder was thicker. USBs, printed text messages, and a burner phone memory card labeled red. I slid it into the old laptop I kept in the shed, one not connected to Wi-Fi, never synced to the house network. Voice memos popped up. He barely notices anything anymore. I could leave for a week and he'd think I was at yoga. Another. Kyle's different. He gets it. Not like Tom, who thinks giving us a roof is the same as love. And then the one that gutted me. He's slow, but his pension covers everything. I mean, why else would I stay? I didn't even blink. I just hit play again, then paused and photographed the screen. Everything was backed up twice, one on a portable SSD that I'd stashed inside a hollowed-out level, and another on a micro SD taped behind the rear taillight of my truck. I wasn't documenting betrayal. I was constructing insulation. From her. From them. The heartbreak had come and gone weeks ago, the night I'd stood in the hallway at 3 a.m. and heard her say his name on the phone. Softly. Laughing. Like I was already dead. Now it was mechanics. A wrench to the ribs. A scalpel to the marriage. I laid everything out on the workbench, took inventory, then began scanning the email Dana had sent from her side account, the one she thought I didn't know existed. We should wait until his next appointment. If they give him another 12 months, we're golden. If not, we pivot early. Either way, we'll be okay. We, as in her and Kyle. That was the moment detachment clicked in. Like flipping a breaker. I wasn't a man anymore. I was a plan. And my plan didn't involve saving anyone. It involved making sure they couldn't spend a single dollar of mine without remembering the cost. So I labeled the folders, zipped the bags, and rescrewed the panel back into the wall. The war had already started. They just hadn't realized I'd been fighting it without them. The Saturday after I left, Dana decided to throw a barbecue. Like nothing had happened. Like I'd just popped out for milk and forgotten the way home. Burgers on the grill. Patio umbrella up. Bluetooth speaker crooning 70s classics like the decade hadn't ended in blood and polyester. She even invited the neighbors, the same ones who'd seen me out at 6:30 every morning watering the lawn in slippers older than Kyle's resume. The guest list was strategic. People who wouldn't ask questions. People who'd always smiled too wide at Dana's jokes and looked through me like drywall. One of them, a real estate agent named Lori, asked, "Where's Thomas?" Loud enough for 3 others to hear. Dana sipped her rose like it was muscle memory. "Oh, he's at the lake. He needed space." She said it with a practiced calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that doesn't fool the air. Kyle took over the grill, my grill. The one I'd built into the brick with my own 2 hands and heat-resistant sealant that cost me 3 blisters and a burned thumb. He flipped steaks like he belonged there, wearing my old apron that read, "License to grill," the faded G already cracked. He laughed too loud. Thumped too many backs. Told a story about how he always saw this backyard as his second home, which earned a few confused chuckles and an awkward silence. Rebecca and Megan? They were trying too hard. Megan played on her phone the entire time, swiping and fake smiling when spoken to. Rebecca helped carry plates but flinched when someone asked about college. She said something about financial aid, adjustments, and changed the subject before anyone could ask why. But the real star of the show wasn't even there. My chair. The old weathered recliner I dragged out every summer. The one with the warped armrest from when Rebecca dropped a sparkler on it back in 2008. That chair sat empty, its outline burned into the lawn like a ghost was still sitting there, watching. No one moved it. No one sat in it. Kyle made a show of almost doing it, plate in hand, then chuckled and plopped onto a plastic lounger instead. Because he knew. They all did. I hadn't called. Not a word. Not a text. My phone was still on, but silent. Their names stacked like ignored tombstones. Dana had sent 2 messages. One was a vague, "Let's talk when you're ready." The other, hours later, "Don't make this bigger than it has to be." I didn't respond. And I wouldn't. Because the longer I stayed quiet, the louder the cracks in their little fantasy became. Dana kept scanning the yard like she expected me to walk in with a cold beer and a confused look, ready to forgive because I was the steady one. But the thing about steady people? When we move, we don't make noise, we make absence. And absence is louder than any scream. By the time the sky darkened and the citronella candles flickered against the shadows, they'd run out of jokes. The music cut out twice, and no one bothered to reconnect it. Kyle stopped laughing. Dana drank slower. The neighbors left early. And the chair? Still empty. Still waiting. Still reminding them, "You replaced me. But you never removed me." Joyce answered the door in a robe. Cigarette already burning. Eyeliner uneven like she'd just woken up or never slept at all. Her townhouse smelled like lavender, bourbon, and unfinished grief. The kind of place where memory clings to furniture and arguments stain the walls. You still drive that rusty Silverado? She muttered as I stepped inside. No hug. No smile. Just raw presence. It gets me where I need to go, I said. She snorted. Well, I hope today it gets you to the truth. You brought coffee. I handed her the cup. Black. No sugar. Just like she used to drink it back when my sister, God rest her, was still alive, and Kyle was just a charming idiot, not a full-blown leech with a plan. We sat across from each other at her kitchen table. It was scratched from years of dice games and arguments. A clock ticked too loud behind me, but she didn't seem to notice. I know why you're here, she said finally, leaning back like she'd waited for this conversation her whole life. And you're right to be worried. Kyle's no lost soul, Tom. He's a goddamn parasite. Always was. I didn't say anything. Just let her go. She lit another cigarette straight off the first one and stared out the window. You know he used my credit back in '06 to buy a motorcycle? Had it in my name. Said he'd surprise me with a road trip. I got the surprise all right. 3 months later, my checking account was in collections and he'd vanished. I gripped my cup tighter. She didn't stop. He did the same to Lisa. And Rhonda. Hell, even Maureen. The woman was 72 and thought he loved her. He took her to court to fight for her dog after she dumped him. The dog, Tom. I felt something slide inside me. A piece of steel I thought I'd buried when my sister died. Kyle hadn't even come to the funeral. Claimed he was overseas. Joyce later told me he was shacked up with some divorced teacher in Albany, bleeding her for every alimony cent. He goes where the money is, Joyce said, eyes narrowing. Dana's just his next feeding tube. And your daughters? They're just leverage. Little tools to keep him relevant. Dana thinks she's different, I muttered. Joyce laughed bitterly. They all do. Until he empties a bank account and leaves a post-it on the microwave. I pulled out a photo, Dana and Kyle on the back porch, too close, eyes too knowing. Taken by a private investigator I'd hired weeks ago when something in my gut told me this wasn't just an affair. This was strategy. Joyce scanned it. Her mouth twisted. Yup, that's the Kyle face. Like he's already counting someone else's pension. I tucked the photo away and stood up. My legs felt like rebar. My stomach? Quiet. Too quiet. You gonna stop him? She asked. No, I said. I already have. She tilted her head, curious. That folder you're carrying. That insurance or revenge? Both. She grinned. Your sister would have loved that. I know. I didn't hug her when I left. We weren't that kind of broken family. But I paused in the doorway and turned back. Joyce, one more thing. You said Maureen had a dog. She nodded. Yeah, Pekingese. Real yappy. And Kyle fought her in court for the dog. Spent $6,000 on lawyers. Won the dog. Sold it to her niece a week later. I let the door close behind me with that last fact rattling in my head like a loose screw in a fuse box. That was Kyle. Always smiling. Always playing. But now, he didn't realize the game was over. And I held a rulebook. The first thing I did was shut down the college fund. Not cancel it, just reroute it. Rebecca's tuition payments had been set on auto draft for years, like clockwork. Dana never questioned it. Never once asked where the money came from. She just assumed it was magic. Or maybe she thought I'd keep paying out of habit, like an obedient old dog wagging his tail while she pet Kyle's ego on the porch. But the minute I handed full financial power to Art, my oldest friend and the only man I'd trust with my last breath, those drafts stopped. He called me the night before the hammer dropped. You sure about this, Tommy? Do it. And he did. By noon the next day, the trust was no longer under my name. It was locked in a discretionary entity with stipulations Dana couldn't dream of cracking. You'd need 2 attorneys, 3 codes, and my permission from the grave to touch it. And guess what? I gave none of it to her. After that, I closed the joint accounts. Slowly, strategically. The main checking account was first, drained and emptied into a private bank upstate where the branch manager still owed me a favor from the time I rewired his entire fuse panel during a blackout in '03. He didn't ask questions, just nodded and gave me a secure access key. Savings was next. That one hit Dana faster. I imagine she opened her phone expecting to see her little safety cushion, only to find a 0 staring back at her like a middle finger in digital font. She probably refreshed it 3 times. Then the mortgage. Most people don't know you can reassign mortgage beneficiaries with the right trust language in a cooperative bank. Dana hadn't been on the title since we refinanced last year. She wanted her credit score untouched, she said. So I took the full ownership and buried the clause inside the trust. Now, the house is owned by a limited property holding I created under my friend's name. Not technically mine. Not legally hers. It's not revenge. It's defensive architecture. I wasn't burning the house down. I was taking the walls with me. By Thursday, Dana was calling. Her tone changed with each voicemail. The first one tried sweet. Hey, just wondering if you're okay. We miss you. Let's talk. The next one was annoyed. I saw the account alerts, Thomas. Is this really necessary? Then came panic. Rebecca says she can't register for spring classes. What the hell are you doing? Finally, rage. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look pathetic. This is why the girls needed Kyle. He's not petty. That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it confirmed everything Joyce had said. Dana wasn't upset because I left. She was upset because I took the map. No more easy money. No more fallback plans. Kyle might have been charming, but Kyle couldn't pay property taxes. Kyle couldn't refinance a damn thing. Kyle was a placeholder. One who smiled nice at barbecues but wouldn't last 3 billing cycles without a bailout. And Dana? She'd spent so long playing queen in a house I built. She never thought to learn how to keep it standing. I kept my replies simple. There were none. Not one call. Not one text. Not one explanation. Because silence isn't weakness. Silence is a lock. And every door they thought I'd left open behind me, it was already sealed shut. Bolted. Reinforced. Let them knock. Let them scream. They could pound on those doors forever. I wasn't inside anymore. I was already free. The first real fracture came on a Monday morning when Kyle tried to take my truck. Not borrow. Take. It had been sitting in the driveway untouched for days. Washed. Gassed. The toolbox still locked in the bed. Dana had probably fed him some nonsense like, it's practically yours now. Or maybe he just felt entitled after 3 weeks of playing house. He jiggled the keyhole. Didn't work. He popped the hood like he knew what he was doing. He didn't. That's when my lawyer showed up. Not in a suit. Not in a Mercedes. Just a guy in jeans with a manila envelope and deadpan delivery. He handed Kyle a cease and desist with a copy of the property trust modifications and a trespassing notice tailored specifically to him. The wording wasn't kind. The message was surgical. Kyle skimmed the first page, turned pale at the second, and by the third, he was sweating like someone had shoved a heat lamp into his ribcage. You can't kick me out, he muttered, voice cracking. Dana said. Dana doesn't own the house. The lawyer cut in. And neither do you. You have 24 hours. Kyle turned to Dana, who had come outside in pajama pants and a confused smile she couldn't hold steady. Tell him, Kyle hissed. Tell him this is a mistake. Dana's eyes darted. She looked at the papers, then at Kyle, then back at the house, as if the bricks might confirm her authority. She didn't say a word. By midnight, Kyle was gone. Didn't even take all his clothes. Just the duffel bag he showed up with, his phone charger, and the smug grin that had cracked under the pressure of actual consequences. Neighbors saw him leave. That mattered more than she realized. 2 days later, Mrs. Delaney from 3 doors down told the postman that the young man with the goatee isn't around anymore. That turned into he was never her cousin, was he? And then someone at the pharmacy started whispering about how Dana's husband hadn't been seen in weeks, but her cousin had been mowing the lawn. Rumors, like termites, don't need truth, just entry points. And Dana had left the doors wide open. She tried to patch it, hosted a small brunch, posted an Instagram photo of Rebecca and Megan pretending to laugh over pancakes. But the chairs were wrong. One was empty. Kyle's shadow loomed larger in his absence than it ever did when he was there. Rebecca stopped showing up in the background. Megan looked angry in every picture, like she knew the audience was fake and the stage was crumbling. Dana started calling again. Not just me. Art, the lawyer, even my accountant. She left messages that started polite and quickly turned frantic. We need to talk about the tuition. There's a lien on the car. Why? I need access to the tax documents. No, Dana. You need a rewind button. But there isn't one. Not anymore. The life she tried to build around Kyle was never a structure. It was wallpaper over rotting wood. And now the storm had come. Kyle vanished. The house cracked. And the woman who once declared I was replaceable? She was learning that some foundations can't be replicated. They can only be mourned. Rebecca's first wake-up call came in the form of a red notification on her college portal. Payment declined. Registration on hold. She didn't panic at first. Just assumed it was a glitch. Maybe her mom forgot to transfer the funds. Or maybe the financial aid office messed something up again. Those things happened. Bureaucracy was chaos. She texted Dana, "Hey, can you check the tuition thing?" Says it didn't go through. No response. So she called. Dana picked up, whispering, "I'll call you back. I'm in the middle of something." Then hung up. She didn't call back. That same evening, Megan stormed into the kitchen, teenage fury practically sparking from her sweatshirt. "Why is the Wi-Fi off? I'm in the middle of a group project, and it just died." Dana opened the router app on her phone and blinked. "It says the account's suspended." "What do you mean suspended?" I don't know. I'll fix it." She didn't. Because at that moment, her business phone buzzed with another alert. "Account access denied. Please contact your financial institution." Dana stared at it like the words were written in a foreign language. Then she tried the company laptop. Password didn't work. Tried again. Still nothing. By the time she called the bank, she already knew. Her name was gone. Stripped from every account connected to the old trust, including the business seed money that I had quietly deposited over the years. A little here, a little there, always enough to make her feel in control, never enough to give her actual ownership. "Ma'am, I'm afraid your name is not authorized on this account," the bank rep said. "We'll need to speak with Mr. Holcomb directly." She hung up before she started screaming. Megan noticed. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Dana muttered. "It's just, your dad is being childish." Rebecca finally snapped. "Mom, where is he?" Dana didn't answer. That night, Rebecca tried calling me. She tried 3 times. I let it ring each time, watching her name blink across the screen like a pulse I couldn't feel anymore. Then came the voicemail. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Tired, maybe for the first time in her life. "Dad, if you're hearing this, I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I don't blame you. But can you please just tell me what's going on?" Megan's freaking out. Mom's acting like everything's fine, but it's not. "You're gone. The money's gone. It's like the whole house is unraveling. I just need to know if you're okay. Please, just talk to us." I listened to that message twice. Then again. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite, but because if I kept it, I'd replay it 100 times and start imagining second chances. And there are no second chances with betrayal. What they were feeling now, disconnection, instability, helplessness, that wasn't punishment. That was gravity. Because for 20 years, I was the quiet force holding the roof up. Paying tuition. Fixing leaky sinks. Replacing routers before they even noticed something was wrong. And now? They were learning what silence really sounded like. Not an absence of noise, but the presence of loss. I parked 3 houses down. Not out of fear. Just out of respect for myself. I didn't want to give the impression I was back. Not for dinner. Not for a second round. Not for redemption. I walked up the drive with no hesitation, no theatrics. Just a man retrieving what was his. The lawn was overgrown. Kyle used to mow it. Megan sure as hell wouldn't. Dana never even touched the mower unless it was to sell it. The porch creaked like it remembered me. I let myself in. The key still worked. They hadn't changed the locks. They really thought I'd crawl back, eventually. Inside, the house smelled different. Not bad. Just off. The kind of scent you don't notice until the man who built the space disappears from it. Megan was on the stairs. She froze when she saw me. Phone in one hand. Bowl of cereal in the other. Her eyes said everything. Surprise, confusion, maybe, something like shame. She didn't speak. Just stood there, breath shallow. I nodded once and kept walking. Dana was in the kitchen, on her second cup of coffee or third glass of denial. When she heard the front door, she called out, "Tom?" She stepped out just as I reached the fireplace. The mantel still had the same clutter, a fake succulent, one of Megan's third-place swim ribbons, a snow globe from Vermont. And in the center, a photo. Us. Christmas 3 years ago. I was in the middle. Dana beside me. Rebecca and Megan on each shoulder, all wearing matching pajamas Dana claimed she bought, ironically. I picked it up. held it like it might shatter, even though the glass was thick. Behind me, Dana spoke, voice breaking from forced calm to fragile Nate. "You're still their father, Thomas." I turned to her. She looked smaller. Not thinner. Smaller. Like reality had trimmed down every illusion she'd built. Her lips were chapped. Hair not done. The robe she wore had a tear near the sleeve. "Good. They made their choice," I said. I slipped the photo into my coat pocket. So did I. She took a half step forward. Not close enough to touch. Just enough to pretend she still had gravity. "You can't just erase everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. That's exactly what you tried to do." Behind her, Megan had stepped into the hallway. Rebecca stood near the stairwell, halfway down. Both silent. Both staring. I didn't address them. "You don't greet ghosts." Dana's voice dropped. "You can't keep punishing them. They're just kids." "No, Dana. They're adults who watched you light the match. And didn't put it out." For a second, just a second, her face collapsed. That polished mask she always wore, the one that made people think she was the strong one, shattered at the edges. "You think walking away makes you stronger?" she whispered. "You think silence is noble?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "No. I think silence is honest. It lets people hear themselves." And with that, I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. The picture in my pocket pressed against my chest like a farewell letter I'd written to myself. Not for them. For the man I used to be. The one who stayed too long. The envelope was cream-colored. Heavy stock. No return address. No signature on the front. "Just for the house," written in my handwriting. The same blocky letters Dana used to mock when I filled out school permission slips. I left it there just before dawn, the air still thick with dew, the sky a bruised purple over the rooftops. I stood on the porch for maybe 30 seconds. Long enough to hear a dog bark in the distance. Long enough to hear my own heartbeat settle into something colder than anger. Then I turned, walked back to the truck, and drove off for good. By the time Dana opened the door, the sun was up. The coffee was likely still brewing. The girls were probably still asleep, or pretending to be, in that strange quiet they'd adopted since I reappeared and left again. Like they were holding their breath, waiting for a third act that would never come. She saw the envelope and knew it wasn't a letter. Inside, the first thing she'd find was a clean copy of the divorce papers. Filed, notarized, processed. No courtroom, no mediation. Just a single signature needed, hers. Attached, a packet of trust revisions. 6 pages long. Each clause bolded, each amendment legal and irreversible. It detailed every fund I'd rerouted, every asset I'd frozen, every inheritance split now into conditions, not for spite, but for integrity. Rebecca and Megan could still access their education accounts, but only through independent review. No backdoors for Dana. No family discretion. Just rules. Just structure. Then came the letter. 1 paragraph. No flowery language. I didn't disappear. I simply stopped carrying what was already broken. That was it. No goodbye. No, I still love you deep down. None of that weak, sentimental glue people slap on betrayal to make it easier to swallow. The final page was a photo. The Christmas one. But this time, it had been altered. Dana's hands shook when she saw it. Same image. Same setting. Same matching pajamas. But my face, neatly, surgically, had been cut out. Not torn. Not scribbled on. Cut. Like a surgeon removing a tumor. She held the photo up and saw the gap where I used to be. That's when Megan came down the stairs. She saw the envelope contents scattered across the table. The photo. The note. Her mother holding her breath like oxygen had suddenly become optional. Megan didn't ask questions. She just sat down across from Dana and whispered, "He's not coming back, is he?" Dana didn't answer. She couldn't. Because in that silence, every lie collapsed. Every story they told themselves, that I was too old to care, too tired to fight, too soft to walk away, evaporated in the face of what I'd actually done. They didn't just lose me. They erased me. And I let them. But I took everything with me. Legacy. Stability. Memory. And now? I was nothing but an outline in a photo they'd never be able to fill. Not with Kyle. Not with apologies. Not with time. I wasn't gone. I was untouchable.